out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
The Prime Minister faces questions over his judgment following the sacking of Nadhim Zahawi.
Good morning, it's 6 o'clock. It's Monday, the 30th of January. You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. Pressure is mounting on the Prime Minister following the sacking of Nadhim Zahawi for breaching the ministerial code. The PM made his decision within an hour of receiving a report into the former party chairman's tax affairs.
The government will announce plans to support struggling emergency care services in the NHS today. The £1 billion proposal will be used to fund thousands of new hospital beds and 800 new ambulances.
Boris Johnson has claimed Vladimir Putin threatened to kill him with a missile strike during a phone call in the run-up to the invasion of Ukraine. According to the former PM, Putin said it would only take a minute.
And if you're planning a holiday this year, wait until you hear this. The most welcoming place in the world's been revealed by a new survey, and it might just surprise you. We'll tell you where it is and get in touch to give us your suggestions.
So to our top story this morning, the Prime Minister is facing questions about his judgment following the sacking of Nadhim Zahawi.
Rishi Sunak made his decision within an hour of receiving a report that found the Conservative Party chairman had breached the ministerial code multiple times in relation to his taxes.
An independent inquiry was set up and it found that Zahawi's actions constituted serious failings, adding that his conduct had fallen below the high standard expected of those who serve in government.
Well, we've been speaking to people in the former Chancellor's constituency to see how they feel about his sacking.
He broke the rules, he deserves to get the sack, doesn't he? Everybody has got to pay their taxes, he didn't do it right, so he deserves the sack. Simple as that, same as anybody else, really.
I think he should have resigned, really, and it's taken a long time. And again, I think, it's been this big delay in, is he going to go, isn't he going to go? Nobody actually makes any decision until the public, opinion becomes so strong that they think they've got to do something about it, really. So I wish they'd called a general election, actually, because I think, we've got another 2 years, haven't we, of this mess, really. And, I'd quite like to have a bit of a change.
I think he had it coming to him. He should have.
I think he should have been honest.
He should have resigned at the beginning of the week.
And it's not the first time he's had question marks about his team.
Joining us now, former special advisor to Mr Zahawi when he was Education Secretary, and that's Mark Lehane. Mark, very good to see you again on this. It was a very fast inquiry, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I was on here last week and people were saying what should happen, should the Prime Minister sack him then? And I, like a lot of people, saying we need to wait and let this inquiry get to the bottom of stuff. It has done. The Prime Minister acted very quickly. It's a very sad situation on a personal level for Nadhim and people that know him. But I think it's probably something that needs to be said. All the newspapers in front of you here this morning have got Nadhim on the front page, which tells you it's a big distraction.
The fact that there has been this independent inquiry removes the personal element, doesn't it? Because he does appear to be well-liked across Westminster. But that is irrelevant. I mean, this investigation found that there wasn't one breach of the ministerial code. There were multiple breaches of the ministerial code. And the fact that the Prime Minister sacked him rather than waiting for him to resign is indicative, is it not, of how serious these breaches were?
Well, there's no doubt. I mean, I looked at, probably like you guys looked at the letters that were exchanged yesterday. The investigation's quite clear that it feels there have been a number of breaches. From what I've read in the newspaper...
Well, it's the same breach a number of times,
yes,
isn't it?
That's right. And I guess, you know, tomorrow is the final day for people to get their tax returns in. So I guess there's a lesson for all of us, if we've got a tax return to do, make sure we know what we've put in there, or indeed what our accountants or whatever have put in there. And if you make a mistake, you really do need to flag it up.
Well, either that or Mr Zahawi is in complete denial of what he's done, because in his resignation letter to the Prime Minister as well, he makes no attempt to apologise for all of this. He made no attempt on the multiple occasions where he should have raised the fact that he was under investigation at all. So obviously his recollection of what happened and how serious it was obviously differs from the inquiry.
That's right, and I read in one of the newspapers this morning that there's talk of bruised feelings by Nadeem and the people around him, that he didn't feel he got his chance to get across everything to the investigation. However, that investigation's happened now. We've got to move on, I think. Nadeem's had to pay the price. He's made mistakes. He's paid the price. I think he'll take it on the chin. I mean, there's big stuff going on that's really important in people's lives. Paying your taxes is absolutely very important, and declaring any mistakes is very important if you're in government. I get that. But this week we've got virtually a national strike. School, you know, half the kids in the country aren't going to get to school, the trains won't be working, and so on and so on. There's big things we need to get on with, and I kind of understand why, if you're the Prime Minister and you've had that return from the independent inquiry, I understand why you probably need to be quite quick in moving on.
And I want to talk to you about the strikes a bit more in a moment, but just picking up on what Eamonn was saying about the lack of remorse. There was no apology at all, but more than that, he turned on the media, talked about the fourth estate, and he accused people that were investigating him, this particular journalist, of trying to smear him. Now the Lib Dems are saying he's unfit to even serve as an MP. Would you agree with that?
Well, obviously I'm biased because I work with him and I know the guy. I actually think the lovely thing about living in our democracy is the constituents, the voters, get to decide whether or not you're fit to be an MP. So I think we've just had this happen. I think there'll be lots of bruised feelings right now. I think we need to give people a chance to go away and reflect, and then, if need be, the people of Stratford-upon-Avon, Nadeem's constituency, can decide.
But he's done as an MP now, isn't he?
Well, I don't know, you know, he's a very popular local MP. I know you had some voices there that weren't so keen. He's done a pretty good job. He's got a big majority. And I think that it would be a real shame if every time people made a mistake that they were thrown out of public life. I think we need more people in public life, like Nadeem, who've had success elsewhere,
Mark,
rather than fewer.
If he had have done the bigger thing and stepped down and said, look, there's this investigation going on, he could have had a chance to reinvent himself. The fact that, you know, he didn't declare, he carried on in office, and the report's author, Solori Magnus, he says, under the ministerial code, ministers have a duty to be as open as possible with Parliament and the public. It does include a general duty to be accurate in statements to ensure a false impression is not given or maintained. And what he's referring to there is Mr Zahawi just ignored the fact that he was under investigation as if he had done nothing wrong or it was no big deal when it was a big deal.
Well, there's stuff in the press, isn't it, that suggests that he feels that he had shared information required and it wasn't passed on. So, to quote the late Queen, recollections may vary. And I think any of us, if we'd had allegations made against us in our jobs or our private lives, would probably want to have a chance for a process to run out so we can get our side of the story across. But we have had that now. It did find against Nadeem. Nadeem's been sacked. That's very sad. I think it's a chance for everyone to go away and reflect upon it before any more decisions are made.
Where I sympathise with them is that tax investigations are never simplistic. I mean, they're very forensic and there's lots of different connotations on them or reasons. But, you know, the tax people don't even understand the law, never mind the rest of us. So there may be little nuances in this where he has a defence, but by and large, it's a massive penalty that they have found against him.
Mark, can I ask you about these strikes then? Because, of course, Nadeem Zahawi was an education secretary in a past life. Some people saying that it was whilst he was in office. They could have had more serious chats with the unions then. Look, the situation on Wednesday, I can say as a parent, is incredibly stressful for families because I understand that teachers don't have to tell the school or parents whether they're striking or not until the day. So all of us are going to be turning up at the school gate unsure what the situation is, and hundreds of children being turned away on the day. I think it's 4.5 million children will be affected on Wednesday. Now, I know you're an outspoken opposer of the strikes. Do you think they're right to be closing schools on Wednesday?
Well, obviously, the right to strike is a really important human right. We mustn't forget that. The question is whether this is the right thing to strike about and whether it's the right time, and I'm not sure it is. And you've also made a very good point, which is that people are not obliged under the law to say if they're going on strike. Again, I think that's fair enough. However...
Do you think that's fair enough? I ask you this because I'm just on WhatsApp groups with lots of parents. No one is opposed. Now, I haven't heard any opposition from the parents at my school to the fact that the school might be closing, but what they want to know is what their childcare provisions need to be on the day. You're entitled to strike, but you're also entitled to be decent to the other hard-working family.
That's what I was going to come on to say. So you don't have an obligation to tell the school if you're not going to be in, if you're going to strike, but I think you should. And actually, as a head teacher, where I dealt with a few colleagues on occasions that were called out to strike, they were fantastic in letting me know in advance what they were going to do so we could plan. I think the majority of teachers in the end will do the right thing. You'll have some hotheads, you'll have some activists that will be encouraging teachers not to share with their schools what they're doing. But overwhelmingly, I think most teachers will say when the time comes. But it is very difficult for head teachers because until you know who is in and who is out, which probably isn't until the day, they will have to assume the worst and they'll hope for the best, but they'll have to plan for the worst.
Mark, is the teachers' strike solvable? I mean, the government is saying, you hear the Chancellor saying, no more money, it stokes inflation, it's not going to happen, it's not going to come from the public purse. If they don't pay teachers more money, where's the compromise going to be?
It is a really difficult one because when Gillian Keegan became the Education Secretary last autumn, she received a letter quite quickly from the NEU saying we need an extra £2 billion a year for schools. Jeremy Hunt in November found an extra £2.3 billion for schools next year and the year after. School funding has got tighter in recent years, but it's got a lot better than it was and it's going to continue to get better over the next few years. Even with inflation, it's going to go up beyond that. So I'm not sure that the NEU just won't take yes for an answer. That's what it feels like. And the people stuck in the middle are the schools and the children being affected by it. There's no more money that's going to come now. If the Department for Education were to try and find more money for schools, for teachers' salaries, it can only come from the existing budget. But the existing Department for Education budget is pretty much committed already. There's not a lot of spare money in the middle going around. So I don't quite know where the unions think it's going to come from, which is why part of me thinks almost they're on strike for not quite for the heck of it, but because they want to make a political point right now with all the other unions.
Interesting. Thank you.
Mark, thanks very much indeed. Mark's a former advisor to Nadeem Zahawi and when he was the Education Secretary, and he's a headmaster. Thank you very much
And
indeed.
I'd love to hear from you at home as well. Are you a parent or a family concerned about Wednesday, not really sure how you're going to plan childcare if you don't find out until you get to the gates at 10 to 9 on the day? Is that the right way to be approaching all of this? Nobody's saying that you shouldn't be allowed to strike, but perhaps let people know if you're going to. Let us know your thoughts, gbviews@gbnews.uk.
And a lot of you will be grandparents. How's it affecting you as well? The former Prime Minister Boris Johnson has claimed that Vladimir Putin threatened his life on a phone call in the run-up to the Ukraine war.
Well, the Russian president reportedly said, I don't want to hurt you, but with a missile, it would only take a minute.
Let's speak to the defence and diplomatic editor of the Sunday Express, Marco Giangelli. Marco, what do you make of this revelation?
Well, it's certainly unusual to get a verbatim account of a conversation between two premiers so soon after the event. But I don't think, I don't think anyone should be surprised at the tone which Vladimir Putin took. The fact is, this is the language he uses. This is the language he has used with Germany. This is the language he has used with France. And with Germany, with France, with others, it's been very effective. I think he hadn't counted on the fact that it perhaps wouldn't be quite so effective with Boris Johnson. Let's not forget that this happened during the process where leaders were seeing what was coming and were trying to prevent it. And really, I think my one surprise is why the Prime Minister didn't reveal it at the time. I think that had he done so, any vacillation, any doubts that existed within the NATO community of well, look, is this guy serious? Is he really going to do something? Might well have disappeared.
What I'm really interested in is what response, if any, Boris Johnson had outside of blah, 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 blah. You know, how did he react to all of this? Because I would relish, I mean, if it was me sitting in that phone and Putin made that threat to me, well, I'd come back with a double your money threat back to him. But you just sort of think, does he think he really scares people? I mean, you know, Johnson could have his finger on the button as well. He can fire missiles. I'm dying to know what he said in response.
Well, I mean, honestly, Eamonn, I don't know. But my read on it is it would have been more of an eye roll than anything else. I mean, this was just confirmation of what we already knew, what Britain, what the US, and some others were trying to convince the rest of Europe that, look, this guy is serious. And yes, he is prone to rhetoric, but in this case, you know, he is not bluffing. I think that's how we would have taken it. I think from Putin's point of view, it was part of a sort of a last hurrah to try to dissuade Britain from taking any further active part in mounting any sort of coalition, which of course we did, following the invasion. I don't know what the Prime Minister actually, you know, said to Mr. Putin. I imagine it would have been polite and dismissive.
It's always in the headlines for almost every story we talk about. I mean, this is a three-part series talking about the start of the war, coming up for the one-year anniversary on the 24th of February. And in that series, they talked to a whole bunch of people, including the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, Jens Stoltenberg from NATO, President Zelensky as well. I suppose lots of people will be poring over it and asking themselves, what have we learnt in that time? And where are we today on the first anniversary? What would your assessment be of that?
Well, we have learned so much, haven't we? Let's not forget that before the February 22 invasion, Russian forces were tested in short-term combats. We've seen them in Georgia. We saw the air forces in Syria. But this is the first time since Afghanistan that Russian forces, Soviet at that time, have found themselves embroiled in something which seemingly has no end date. And we have seen, and not just us, I mean, NATO, has seen how effective or ineffective the Russian war machine has been. Now, let's remember that in February last year, there were calls by Kyiv for tanks, for fighter jets. And the response for fighter jets then was, well, now hang on, it's going to take 6 months to train them. We suspect it'll be over long before then. Let's not jump the gun. Well, here we are, a year later, and, you know, in hindsight, one could reasonably argue that, you know, the Ukraine could have had tanks and could have had fighter jets 6 months ago. And they would have, you know, been very effective. You know, what have we learned? We have learned that what we hoped but didn't realize, that Russia's war machine, particularly its army, the way it's formulated, the top-down structure, which really doesn't have an NCO cadre. It really doesn't have the type of tiers that NATO armies have. We've seen how badly that does on the ground. We've seen how bad they are in logistics. And, it has been an eye-opener.
Marco Gengeli, really appreciate your take on things. Marco was the defence editor of the Sunday Express. We'll say goodbye to you. Thank you very much. The time is 6:17. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
Well, the biggest day of industrial action to hit the UK in decades will grind much of the country to a halt this week. Up to 500,000 public service workers will protest against plummeting living standards and skyrocketing rates of inflation on Wednesday.
A 16-year-old boy will appear in court today charged with the murder of a 15-year-old girl who was stabbed to death in Northumberland. Holly Newton was found injured on Friday and died from her wounds in hospital. The boy, who cannot be named, is also charged with attempted murder and possession of an offensive weapon.
New research suggests over 500,000 more people are calling in sick to work than before the pandemic. Analysis by the group Rest Less found a 20% increase among 50 to 64-year-olds staying home more often since 2019.
A coroner has ruled a 26-year-old man would probably have survived a serious infection had he been allowed to see a doctor in person.
Yeah, a shocking case this. An inquest into David Nash's death concluded a face-to-face GP appointment could have saved his life.
Instead, the law student died from brain stem swelling. Anna Riley has more.
David Nash was a talented musician who hoped to become a barrister, but at just 26 years old, his life was tragically cut short. He died in November 2020 from brainstem swelling, but if he'd been able to see a GP, he'd most likely have survived. Instead, after finding a lump on his neck, David spoke to his GP practice in Leeds 4 times over a 19-day period, but wasn't seen in person.
I'm very fine, my sinuses, my back and my neck, and I've got temperature as well. I've had it for about a week.
Oh, a week, right.
Yeah, I've had it from about last Friday, and I feel the temperature, just these pains are really bad.
An inquest found the failure to give David a face-to-face GP appointment in the days before his death was a missed opportunity. His parents, Anne and Andrew Nash, welcome the findings, but feel David was let down.
Care, definitely from the practice, was very poor. They didn't join up the consultations. They didn't elude the right information from him. But he gave them all the information, but they then didn't use it to make a diagnosis. And yeah, they failed him. He became so unwell. At the time he got to A&E, he was so unwell. And although they tried, he was critically ill when he arrived there. So.
No, they have recognised their failures. It's just such a shame a young lad's lost his life and that they didn't recognise at the time because all the signals were there.
Andrew and Anne believe other families are still suffering unnecessarily, with essential medical appointments still being carried out over the phone rather than in person.
The only positive that can come from it is that people do listen, and I fear it is still going on. So
yeah, the verdict of Coroner Abigail Coombs is a powerful message because it adds to the debate of access to GPs. And as I say, the only positive that can come out is that if other GP practices can learn from this mistake, I don't think it'll ever happen again at David's GP practice. They've learned from it, but clearly it's better that everyone learns from it and that future deaths are prevented, because going through this it's been dreadful.
David was under the care of Burley Park Medical Centre at the height of the pandemic, when practices were seeing large numbers of patients remotely. They said, "We offer our deepest condolences and apologies to David Nash's family and friends, and fully accept the outcome of the coroner's inquest. Our practice now has a policy to ensure that patients with appropriate clinical presentations are automatically referred to a face-to-face appointment, as do patients who have had multiple contacts with the practice." David will forever be cherished by those that love him, and his parents hope that his death will not be in vain. Anna Riley, GB News, Nantwich.
We'll be referring to David's story throughout the course of the programme today. So, what does this say? All parents say things they don't mean to keep their children happy, but if you fail to keep a promise to a toddler, you'd better have a decent excuse, because even children as young as 3 can spot a cop-out, says a study.
Yeah, this is fascinating. So a team at the Duke University in North Carolina pulled a group of 3 to 5-year-olds together and said, right, we're going to walk out of the room, we're going to go and get you a puppet and we're going to bring it back. They went out of the room, they came back to the group of toddlers without a puppet, and lo and behold, the kids didn't get fooled by it, and this is somehow newsworthy. I mean, kids are sharp as a tack if they think they're getting a present and it doesn't materialise.
Or you mustn't be a very good parent if you can't lie convincingly to your children.
Yes, so let us know. Are you surprised to hear that toddlers are pretty sharp when it comes to spotting a white lie? Doesn't surprise me.
They're not sharper than me, never have been. I can tell you that. Now, we're going to take a break, and after that, we're going to be finding out where in Britain in particular has made it to the list of the most welcoming places in the world. Some great places that you may not have thought here, from Lithuania to Taiwan, Mexico, Brazil, in this whole list, so it might determine where your next holiday will be.
First though, here's your forecast.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. The new working week is getting off to a fairly fine start for many of us, and that is thanks to a ridge of high pressure that is building in across the UK, our fair weather friend helping to settle things down. We do just have this lingering cold front across the far south, so there is still a bit of cloud around for Devon and Cornwall first thing, but that clearing its way off, and behind that there is a good amount of sunny intervals for many of us throughout the day. The showers across the north tending to ease out as well, and the winds dying down also, though just remaining a bit brisk across Shetland up until the afternoon. Temperature-wise, not doing too badly for the time of year. Across England and Wales will be around 9, maybe 10 degrees Celsius in places, even 6 to 8 degrees across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Throughout this late afternoon and into the evening, though, we are going to see the cloud build in from the west, Northern Ireland into parts of western Scotland, and the wet and windy weather then returns with this next band of rain pushing in. Ahead of that, there will be some clear spells across parts of southeast England, so we could see temperatures drop off here during the evening, but they'll tend to moderate as we move throughout the night and the cloud builds again. But with the breeze building up again in northwestern areas, most of us will remain frost-free as we move into the start of Tuesday. This band of rain then moving steadily southwards, fizzling out as it does so, not much rain on that. Behind that we'll have blustery showers moving into Scotland. These will be heavy in places with some hail and snow falling down to around 300-400 metres over the mountains. Staying fairly brisk, particularly across the north, but where we see some sunny intervals in the south. Again, temperatures slightly up, 10-11 degrees, and a fairly pleasant day with those sunny intervals. Temperatures look to be on a slowly upwards climb throughout the rest of the week as well, but if you are in Scotland, do take care for the end of Tuesday and into the start of Wednesday, where we are expecting some particularly strong winds. Enjoy your Monday.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons. I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. Across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back at 6:27, still to come on the programme this morning.
Well, in 10 minutes' time, we're going to be speaking to Health Minister Helen Whatley as the government lays out £1 billion plan to help the struggling NHS.
At 7:15, as more and more people are choosing to live in flats, we'll be finding out what's behind the rise as more and more people opt to move away from traditional houses.
People don't choose to live in flats. They've no other options. I actually think they've got us... They won't be happy until they have us all living like mice in little tiny units, breathing in foul air. And I don't know how, you know, when you live in somewhere as confined as a flat, you better not spend much time in there because you literally will go up the wall. That has to be said.
I don't know if it is you decided it's actually a lot cheaper to run a flat than a house with this cost of living crisis.
Yes, it would be, but I don't think people have got choices as well. And I think that if I see another high street where they knock down a shop, where they knock down a pub, and they build either retirement flats or tiny unaffordable apartments. I mean, tiny apartments for £700,000-800,000, £1 million in the south of England. Just absolutely
they're
incredible.
not cheap. That's the point, isn't it? Even so, just a flat. And
I remember looking at a flat once, and the estate agent saying to me, I said, "But there's no room for a wardrobe in this room. You couldn't get a wardrobe in this room." And the estate agent said to me, young people today, Mr. Holmes, they don't use wardrobes. They don't use wardrobes. I said, give me a break. So the idea was that young people don't use wardrobes, so you don't have the choice because there's no room to put them in a bedroom or whatever.
Maybe have one of those beds, divan, where you just keep your stuff underneath the bed or in a drawer. We are living in shoeboxes increasing. Let us know your experiences. Get in touch in all the usual ways.
Okay, GB Views at gbnews.uk or on the Twitter sphere.
So many parents could be counting down the days now to their half-term break. Just over a week, isn't it? But according to Booking.com, warmer weather does not necessarily equate to a warmer welcome.
Well, what they have done, Booking.com, is compiled a list of the most welcoming places on earth, right? Somewhere where you're guaranteed a warm welcome. And here to tell us where those places are and how they've decided on this is travel expert Simon Calder. So it's a number of effects. What constitutes a warm welcome?
OK, well, basically, Booking.com have gone through over 240 million reviews that people who've stayed in places have left and calculated those places which issued the warmest welcome and looked at how towns and cities are placed in terms of the proportion of great reviews. And extraordinarily, York is right up there in the top 10 worldwide. And I think even more interesting, possibly, is what's happening in the UK. Kirkwall in Orkney is absolutely top of the list. Pitlochry in the Highlands also there. But 4 locations in Northern Ireland.
4?
Yep. Enniskillen in County Fermanagh, Ballycastle, of course, County Antrim, beautiful resort. Newcastle, County Down, and Newry in County Down are all there. Couple in Lincolnshire, Cleethorpes and Stamford, very different sides of the county, very different places, but both gorgeous. And then finally in Somerset, Frome and Glastonbury. So clearly they are doing the things right there. And the other interesting aspect of this survey is that people are absolutely enthusiastic about travelling. After 3 years of COVID, they're saying we're going to go for it this year.
I look at the list of the most welcoming destinations in the world, so broadening it beyond the UK, and I have to say I'm absolutely gobsmacked by the list. As you say, York, great that it's in there, but Klaipėda, Lithuania?
Beautiful on the
Never
coast.
heard of it.
Yeah, that was a beautiful town on
Is it the capital?
On the Baltic coast. No, capital is Vilnius, but Klaipėda, a lovely Baltic location. Exactly, Baltic is the key here. Ushuaia, down in the southern tip of Argentina. Again, a bit breezy, but very, very welcoming. You've also got Mexico City, one of my absolute favourite destinations. And then lovely San Sebastian in Spain, not one of the most popular resorts, but actually a glorious city on the north coast, on the Bay of Biscay, full of fantastic places to eat, as well as clearly very welcoming places to stay.
Yeah, I am absolutely thrilled at the Northern Irish representation in all of this. You know, for only 1.5 million people to live there and 4 nominations in all of this is absolutely incredible. So,
and 2 in Somerset as well, which is.
Sorry, we're on the Northern Ireland.
Oh,
Sorry,
right.
we don't care about Somerset. Right. So basically, if you're Irish, come into the parlour. There's a welcome there for you, as the song goes.
Yes.
And that's the whole thing. People will say when they visit Northern Ireland, they will say, we had a really good time. Everybody was so friendly, as if people are more standoffish in other places. But I think a lot of it's got to do with alcohol, personally.
Oh, well, you see, there's nothing quite like a pint in one of the fantastic pubs in Belfast. But I just find it is just a natural thing that people in Northern Ireland are just... every time I go there, I'm heading there again this coming weekend to Belfast. Of course, yes, it's just a great place, and it is the unsung part of the nation of the UK where, yes, Wales is fantastic, Scotland beautiful, England too, but Northern Ireland, people simply don't go in the numbers that the country deserves.
People think we fight all the time there, but you see, it's just that we hate each other. We love everybody else. It's only ourselves we can't get on.
I've just realised, actually, it's got representation from Northern Ireland, Scotland and England, but nothing in Wales. And the Welsh are incredibly welcoming.
Yes.
I'm really surprised that there's no Welsh.
Yeah, well, clearly the competition was strong. And the great thing about competition is that next year's Booking.com survey, I'm sure there will be a lot of people in some of those beautiful Welsh towns and cities who will be who will be there.
A lot of these British destinations are connected by the airline Flybe, which again have gone into receivership. It's folded for the second time in, what, a year or so?
3 years ago, actually. In March 2020, they went bust just as the COVID pandemic was beginning. Yes, really serious news for a number of communities. Belfast, George Best Belfast City Airport will see a lot of flights cancelled today. Places like Newquay, it was about 1/3 of their business. And this is going to be really troublesome. Almost 300 flights this week due to be operated by Flybe. That's over 20,000 seats. But the trouble was for Flybe, many of those 20,000 seats were empty, and they simply couldn't make a go of it. The administrators have closed everything down. You're being told don't go to the airport until you've got another flight. There's rescue flights on EasyJet, on British Airways, and coming up on Ryanair as well. They basically just say, give us 50 quid and we'll fly you if you were a Flybe customer.
Yeah. So what happens if Flybe have your money? Do they keep that, or how do you get it back?
Most people will have paid with a card direct to the airline, and they will be able to get it back. If you went through an agent or you booked it as part of a holiday, it's more complicated than that. But just call your bank, and the money will be back, hopefully sooner rather than later. The banks are kind of expecting lots of calls today.
Another consequence of Brexit, which will not be publicised much, and that is that Aer Lingus have been forced to pull out of Belfast, where they would connect to London, they would connect to Manchester, they'd connect to places in Scotland. And why is that? Tell us why that's happened.
Well, the Civil Aviation Authority has strict rules on the ownership of airlines that can fly within the UK. Aer Lingus, which clearly is a very good Irish airline based in the Republic, has been for years shuttling between Belfast City and London Heathrow. They were told, you've got to stop because of Brexit. You don't meet the ownership requirements, and therefore British Airways, which is actually a sister airline in IAG, has effectively stepped in. So, for example, I booked my flight with Aer Lingus for this coming weekend, but I'm actually going to be on a British Airways plane. But anything which reduces competition and choice is clearly not a great thing.
Not a great thing. But this list is a great thing. Most welcoming destinations on planet Earth. Thank you very much indeed, Simon. Thank you.
Right, after the break, we'll be speaking to the Health Minister, Helen Whately, and we'll be going through the papers with Dawn Neeson and Nigel Nelson. We'll see you in a sec. He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamonn Holmes, back on the TV
Surprised
with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamonn. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamonn Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous. Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like.
Absolutely.
On Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the programme. We are joined now by Health Minister Helen Whately. A very good morning to you, Minister. Thanks for joining us and for withstanding the weather outside. Look, we've got to start off by talking to you about the big news yesterday of Nadeem Zahawi's sacking. I suppose the government wants to draw a line under all of this, but there are lots of questions remaining, not least about the judgment of your boss, Rishi Sunak. Will he come forward and answer his case about how much he knew and when he became aware of all of the details of this? Because not long ago, he stood at the dispatch box saying the matter was settled.
Well, actually, as everyone will have seen yesterday, the Prime Minister made the decision to remove Nadeem Zahawi from his position in government. He did that once he got the report in from the independent ethics advisor, which was very clear about what had or hadn't happened, and so the Prime Minister rightly made that decision.
Clear, though, wasn't it, this time last week? He'd made the admission that he'd paid this penalty to HMRC. We knew that he had been Chancellor when he's being investigated by them. It didn't need an independent panel for the Prime Minister to take the action, did it?
Actually, it's a pretty serious thing for somebody to be removed from their job as a minister in the government, and something like that should follow a fair and proper process. That's why the Prime Minister asked his independent ethics advisor to look into it. So Laurie Magnus did that and then set out very clearly his judgment, which was then the basis on which the Prime Minister made the decision to remove Nadeem Zahawi.
Minister, you're making an investment. You've got an announcement about money going into the NHS. Tell us about that.
Yes, thank you. That's what I'm here to talk about today, is what we're doing to improve the performance in accident and emergency departments and ambulances, because we know this winter it's been really tough in A&E and some people have had to wait too long for ambulances, and we're determined to fix that. So later today we're going to be publishing our plan for recovering urgent and emergency care, both doing more in A&E and putting more resources into A&E, our hospitals and our ambulances, and also actually doing things differently. So on the one hand, there's an extra £1 billion of funding going in for 5,000 more beds in hospitals and 800 new ambulances. It's not just about doing more, it's also about changing the way that we look after people, caring for more people out of hospital, meaning that more people don't have to go into hospital if they don't really need to, and also helping people get discharged from hospital when they're fit to go home.
Isn't there a danger that you're buying ambulances, you're investing in those, but you're not investing in the people who will crew them or drive them?
Well, that's a really important point, both for the ambulances and for the beds. This is as much, if not more, about staff than it is about the equipment. So yes, we have to have more staff. In fact, we're on track to have 50,000 more nurses in our NHS by 2024. Remember, we've got over 35,000 more doctors in the NHS compared to 2010. We're also recruiting more paramedics and extra staff, for instance, they're called emergency medical technicians, so extra support staff. So yes, more staff is an important part of it to increase the capacity. But as I said, it's not just about having more, it's also about doing some things differently. So for instance, we can do more to help people who often go in and out of hospital. If you're frail and elderly, you may go in and out of hospital. It's not good for those individuals. Also, it clearly puts extra pressure on the health service. So one of the things that we're doing is standardising, improving the frail elderly services across the country. Another thing is much more of what's called hospital at home, also described as virtual wards, where before people would have been in hospital, but now with new technology, they can be cared for at home through a combination of innovative technology and also community health teams going around to see people at home.
Forgive me, people at home might well be listening to all of this and feel as though you sound a little bit out of touch with such optimism about recruiting new nurses and new doctors. We hear from nurses and doctors on this programme all the time that they just are leaving the sector in their droves. Retention is your major problem. How on earth are you going to be attracting all these new people into the NHS if you won't pay them what they're asking for?
Well, doctors have been welcoming the plans that we're publishing today as seeing as an important thing for us to be doing. And everybody working in the NHS wants to be making sure that they can care for people as well as they possibly can, as well as they want to. But you're absolutely right. This is also about making sure that staff are happy and sticking in the NHS. And that's one reason, as I said, that we're recruiting 50,000 more nurses. When I speak to nurses, what I so often hear is the thing that makes their job hardest is not being part of a fully staffed team, having, for instance, agency staff on the team who may do a really good job, but they're not the usual members of that team. That's one reason why recruiting these extra nurses is so important.
We've got you beside a very noisy road there, and I'm sure it's difficult to hear us and exactly what we're saying. But on the question of ambulances, Minister, I don't know if you've ever been in an ambulance, but I have had the misfortune in the past 9 months to have been in 3 separate ambulances, and I had back problems. And in each one of those ambulances, the crews complain and the patients complain about the lack of suspension. My only plea to you is, when you're buying these ambulances, tell the manufacturers to put some springs in them, cushion them. The irony is, of course, you're very vulnerable in an ambulance and you're at your lowest, and it is just, you're like an egg in a box being rattled about, so you are. So a few springs on those wheels would be very, very welcoming.
I hear you. I'm sorry to hear that you've had to go in an ambulance so many times recently. But really important, clearly, as we get the 800 new ambulances, to make sure that they're the right equipment and the best that we can give our staff and clearly the patients travelling in them.
Helen Whately, before we let you go, I just want to ask you about an inquest that has just returned into the death of a law student, David Nash. He wanted to see a GP face-to-face. He tried 4 times. He was only able to see a GP online, which is one of the measures that, of course, you want to see more of. And this inquest found that his life could have been saved had he seen a GP face-to-face. Just your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't know about that particular case, which sounds extremely sad, but you wouldn't expect me as a minister to be able to comment on something specific like that. But in general, clearly it's really important that people are able to see their GP. We know that last year GPs saw on average to 90,000 appointments a day. So GPs have been seeing lots of people, and many of those appointments are face-to-face. Yes, some people are seeing their GP online, and sometimes that's more convenient and helpful for the patient. But for those who need to see a GP face-to-face, of course they should be able to.
Helen Whately, Minister of State for Health and Social Care, thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. In the studio now to go through the newspapers, Dawn Neeson and Nigel Nelson. So, Nigel, we've got a big day of strikes on Wednesday. It's almost like a general strike. But the law must have changed. You will know this, because in days of old, in the 70s, they used to just strike until it was resolved. Strikes would go on forever. Why are we all just like one-day strikes now? Has there been a change in the laws?
No, there's been a change in the way the unions actually operate, that they're doing everything more targeted. So what you've seen is, for instance, the RMT on the railways have been extending strikes. You get 48 hours rather than just one day. What's happening on Wednesday is organised by the TUC, which is a day of action. So what they're principally protesting about is the anti-strike laws that Rishi Sunak wants to bring in. What is actually happening on the day is the unions have then agreed to coordinate strikes on that particular day, just to enhance the TUC message, and obviously get theirs across about pay. So that's the difference. Not quite a general strike, because these are only public sector workers. The private sector, according to the TUC General Secretary, seem to have actually settled their pay claims, which is what the government should be doing.
OK. Interesting. Dawn, let's start with the Times front page. And you've chosen this story about Nadeem Zahawi, and it goes with the headline, Sunak getting tough on standards. And I suppose it begs the question, what about Dominic Raab? 24 cases of bullying up against him.
Well, exactly. I mean, you can't avoid Nadeem Zahawi is on the front page of pretty much every newspaper this morning, apart from, interestingly, the Daily Mail, who don't mention him on page one. Very curious there.
Who have they got on their front page? Let me think.
They have got
Boris
Esther
Johnson.
Ranson and Boris Johnson. Yes, what a surprise. But yeah, this is the Times, who have done it quite comprehensively. As we know from the weekend, that Rishi Sunak finally got tough and sacked Nadeem Zahawi, despite being the one who appointed him, knowing that all this was going on in the background. So you do have to question his judgment in that sense. And as soon as the report was filed by Sir Laurie Magnus, Rishi acted and sacked Zahawi within half an hour. But as you say, Dominic Raab is also being investigated for bullying. And now Rishi Sunak is, I do feel slightly sorry for him, because he has inherited a lot of problems that stem over from Boris Johnson's time. And I do believe he is trying to make a difference, whether he actually achieve it or not. But as you say, he does have the Raab situation to sort out. But he is saying now that he wants to appoint a squeaky clean party chairman. And I'm just thinking, I'm trying to think who would actually fit that bill. I mean, Boris Johnson has been suggested. I mean, I would humbly suggest...
That was by Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Yes. Probably not the squeakiest clean person I can think. So, but in any case, he has gone. We do need a new past chairman, and it is going to be very interesting to see now how Rishi getting stuff with zero tolerance does react to the Dominic Raab situation.
Do you feel sorry for Rishi Sunak? I mean, a lot of people, his allies, are certainly saying he's just inherited this disaster from Boris Johnson, but it was his decision to appoint Nadeem Zahawi into his cabinet. It was his responsibility to check up on what was going on.
Yes, yes, exactly. So, no, the answer is no, I don't feel sorry for him. What I think should have happened is that this has been rumbling around for some time, the whole tax issue. What should have happened is that Rishi Sunak should have talked to Nadeem Zahawi before appointing him and asked him the questions, in fact, the ethics advisor did, and then decide whether to go ahead. Once all this came out, the honourable thing for Nadeem Zahawi to do was to resign. He should have resigned this time last week. And then he might have a chance of a political comeback. Gavin Williamson resigned in November. We've all forgotten that, but he did so not to be a distraction to the government.
You know, the thing that annoys me with everything these days is that Zahawi hasn't said sorry. I mean, quite clearly. I mean, 7 times he at least misled people over his tax affairs, the Prime Minister included. And he hasn't said sorry. And his resignation letter was like, well, I've done an amazing thing, and it's all the fault of the Fourth Estate or the media. That's us. I mean, honestly, Isabel, I feel like, newspapers are to blame for, the royal situation, everything that goes on in politics. I mean...
Well, I'm glad you've admitted it.
Probably the weather as well. Thank you very much, Eamonn. You're not helping here.
Thank goodness for journalists investigating standards in public life, because it seems as though they aren't able to do it themselves. And the fact that Nadeem Zahawi was going around threatening sending legal letters to people who were investigating.
And in this country, at least we do have a press that hold politicians to account. So many countries, you don't get that.
That's absolutely...
I don't want to hurt you, but with a missile, it would take only It sounds like a line from
Hello,
a
hello.
Bond villain, doesn't it?
It's a very good impression. Yes, this is the story about Boris Johnson being threatened by Vladimir Putin. This was the lead up to the Ukrainian war when they're having a chat on the phone. And Putin turns around to our Prime Minister at the time and says, I don't want to hurt you, but with a missile, I could take you out at any minute. I think, Eamonn, you asked earlier, what was Boris Johnson's response?
Yeah.
We don't know that.
Well, mine would have been 2 words, the second of which would have been off.
There was always that, or you could have put it slightly more diplomatically and said, look, how dare you threaten me? This is not the way that world leaders should actually behave to each other. But I really would like to know what Boris Johnson said. Was he just silent on the phone in abject terror?
And also, why didn't he say so sooner? Could that have changed things? If he'd have come off the phone and said, I've just been threatened, you know, it might have escalated things, but it might have also...
Wouldn't you get on the phone immediately to President Biden and says, hey, guess what's happened?
Yeah, more questions than it answers. But
Yeah,
of course,
absolutely.
Boris Johnson back on the front pages.
You'd have said mine are bigger than yours. You know, I've got more off them, and more accurate.
Well, this is a documentary that's going out on TV tonight called Putin versus the West. And the interesting quote in it is from the Army General Valery Shoigu, who actually said to Boris, we used to be the 4th army in the world. We are now number 2. And I think that's the whole point of this, isn't it? It is literally, I mean, sort of like, you know, the woody waving competition.
Yeah. Quite right.
Who's his biggest?
Indeed. Dawn, let's go to the front of the Telegraph. This is about waiting times in the NHS, and this is trying to get to the true waiting times as opposed to the ones that meet certain criteria and objectives and all the rest of it.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, as you know, Helen was just explaining, going to be announced today. On top of Rishi Sunak saying 800 more ambulances, thousands more beds, etc., etc., NHS England are being ordered to publish figures showing exactly how many people are trolley waiting. I mean, in December, we know it's 55,000 were waiting 12 hours or more to be admitted from A&E to hospital. And 1 in 7 beds are currently occupied by what is horrifically called bed blockers, people who are medically fit to be discharged but can't because the care system's in such disarray. Look, in theory, on paper, like everything, it sounds brilliant. But you know what, Isabel, the one thing that worries me about this story is, like, NHS managers need to tell us what's going on. It's like, well, hold on a minute. Part of the problem with the NHS is there's too many managers. There's not enough, as you pointed out earlier, right, on Eamonn, not enough people driving the ambulances, not enough nurses on the front line, not enough GPs to open surgery so people can access them. And the other thing that worries me about this story is sort of like virtual hospital wards at home. I mean, you try explaining that to, like, my mum, for example, in the mid-80s. Mum, you know, you're going to, just tune into your computer and you'll have a virtual hospital ward. It's insane. It's just, I don't understand how it's going to work. It sounds good, but how is it going to work?
Yeah, what did you make of Helen Whately, though, when she was referring to getting all these new nurses and doctors into the NHS? I mean, what planet is she living on?
Well, the whole thing is this question of pay, isn't it? And they still won't discuss pay with the nurses. So recruitment's going to be difficult. I mean, you're talking about 300,000 vacancies in the NHS and social care. The idea of the figures she's talking about don't fill those gaps. But the first thing is to address fair pay for the people who are doing the job. That she sidestepped constantly, even though you kept asking her.
I know.
Yeah. And as we head towards the teacher strike and those other strikes on Wednesday, the Mirror reflects a story. 1 in 6 head teachers quit within 5 years. So bear that in mind if you're thinking of a career in teaching. With the time at 4 minutes to 7, with that we will take a break and we'll have more of the top news stories of the day right after this. Don't go away. Here's the weather.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. The new working week is getting off to a fairly fine start for many of us, and that is thanks to a ridge of high pressure that is building in across the UK, our fair weather friend helping to settle things down. We do just have this lingering cold front across the far south, so there is still a bit of cloud around for Devon and Cornwall first thing, but that clearing its way off, and behind that there is a good amount of sunny intervals for many of us throughout the day. The showers across the north tending to ease out as well, and the winds dying down also, though just remaining a bit brisk across Shetland up until the afternoon. Temperature-wise, not doing too badly for the time of year. Across England and Wales will be around 9, maybe 10 degrees Celsius in places, even 6 to 8 degrees across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Throughout this late afternoon and into the evening, though, we are going to see the cloud build in from the west, Northern Ireland into parts of western Scotland, and the wet and windy weather then returns with this next band of rain pushing in. Ahead of that, there will be some clear spells across parts of southeast England, so we could see temperatures drop off here during the evening, but they'll tend to moderate as we move throughout the night and the cloud builds again. But with the breeze building up again in northwestern areas, most of us will remain frost-free as we move into the start of Tuesday. This band of rain then moving steadily southwards, fizzling out as it does so, not much rain on that. Behind that we'll have blustery showers moving into Scotland. These will be heavy in places with some hail and snow falling down to around 300-400 metres over the mountains. Staying fairly brisk, particularly across the north, but where we see some sunny intervals in the south. Again, temperatures slightly up, 10-11 degrees, and a fairly pleasant day with those sunny intervals. Temperatures look to be on a slowly upwards climb throughout the rest of the week as well, but if you are in Scotland, do take care for the end of Tuesday and into the start of Wednesday, where we are expecting some particularly strong winds. Enjoy your Monday.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Rishi Sunak faces questions over his judgment following the sacking of Nadeem Zahawi.
Hello there, very good to see you. 7 o'clock, Monday the 30th of January. Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. Pressure is mounting on the Prime Minister this morning to answer questions about what he knew and when following the sacking of Nadeem Zahawi for breaches of the ministerial code.
The government will announce plans to support struggling emergency care services in the NHS today. The £1 billion proposal would be used to fund thousands of new hospital beds and 800 new ambulances.
Boris Johnson has claimed Vladimir Putin threatened to kill him with a missile strike during a phone call in the run-up to the invasion of Ukraine. According to the former PM, Putin said it would only take a minute.
And as Big Brother watching you, we'll ask if your tweets and Facebook posts could pose a risk to your free speech as a new report on freedom of expression and online privacy is launched.
Well, welcome to the programme. Our top story this morning, the Prime Minister is facing questions about his judgment following the sacking of Nadeem Zahawi.
Rishi Sunak made his decision within an hour of receiving a report that found the Conservative chairman had breached the ministerial code multiple times in relation to his taxes.
Well, the independent inquiry found that Zahawi's actions constituted serious failings, adding his conduct had fallen below the high standard expected of those who serve in government.
Now, just half an hour ago on the programme, the Health Minister, Helen Whately, told us the Prime Minister had done the right thing.
The Prime Minister made the decision to remove Nadeem Zahawi from his position in government. He did that once he got the report in from the independent ethics advisor, which was very clear about what had or hadn't happened, and so the Prime Minister rightly made that decision.
He'd made the admission that he'd paid this penalty to HMRC. We knew that he had been Chancellor when he's being investigated by them. It didn't need an independent panel for the Prime Minister to take the action, did it?
Actually, it's a pretty serious thing for somebody to be removed from their job as a minister in the government, and something like that should follow a fair and proper process. That's why the Prime Minister asked his independent ethics advisor to look into it. So Laurie Magnus did that and then set out very clearly his judgment, which was then the basis on which the Prime Minister made the decision to remove Nadeem Zahawi.
Well, as some call for Zahawi to stand down as an MP, we've been to his constituency, speaking to people there about what they think.
He broke the rules, he deserves to get the sack, doesn't he? Everybody has got to pay their taxes, he didn't do it right, so he deserves a sack. Simple as that, same as anybody else, really.
I think he should have resigned, really, and it's taken a long time. And again, I think, you know, it's been this big delay in, is he going to go, isn't he going to go? Nobody actually makes any decision until the public, you know, opinion becomes so strong that they think they've got to do something about it, really. So I wish they'd called a general election, actually, because I think, you know, we've got another 2 years, haven't we, of this mess, really. And, you know, I'd quite like to have a bit of a change.
I think he had it coming to him. He should have.
I think he should have been
resigned.
honest.
He should have resigned at the beginning of the week.
And it's not the first time he's had question marks about his deed.
Well, some opinions there. To give his opinion, former special advisor to Mr Zahawi when he was Education Secretary, and that's Mark Lehane, who's with us here in the studio. Everybody has a view on this. It seems to be Mr Zahawi's view is that he did very little wrong because in his letter of resignation we do not see an apology.
Yeah, it's quite clear that recollections may vary, as it were, to paraphrase the late Queen, in terms of exactly what went on. But I think it's fair to say that the Prime Minister asked for an independent inquiry. I think it was only right that happened. Sacking someone is a pretty big deal. I think we'd all want to have a chance to have our say if allegations were made against us. That inquiry was quite speedy. It came back, it found that Nadeem had broken various parts of the ministerial code, and the Prime Minister took a quick decision to let him go. It's very sad, particularly on a personal level, but we are where we are, and given the challenges that the country's facing right now, we've got all those strikes later on this week, it feels right to me that a decision was made quite quickly so we can focus on those things.
Do you think his political career is over? Because I just wonder, I mean, lots of people we've spoken to all repeat what you've just said, that on a personal level he was a delightful chap, and he clearly has a huge amount to offer to this country, given his experience. But his lack of contrition, as Eamonn said, but not only that, the way he's attacked the media, he sent legal letters to people who were investigating him. People will see him as somebody who dodged paying his tax, and that will not sit well with them.
I mean, I think it's fair to say that lots of people have lots of views about what's gone on. Probably right now isn't the right time to decide whether or not someone stays on in politics, whether they have to step back from public life, because it's all so fresh. And the lovely thing about living in a democracy is you and I don't need to make those decisions. The constituents of Stratford-upon-Avon, where Nadeem is the MP, they can decide ultimately whether he stays as an MP.
Yeah.
What I would say is, I do think we need more people with experience outside politics to come into politics, business people, teachers and so on. So I think we need more people like Nadeem, not fewer.
Well, there might be a lot of head teachers knocking about available in the employment market. In the Daily Mirror today, 1 in 6 head teachers quit within 5 years. Now, as a former head teacher yourself, what would you say about that?
Well, I started my teacher training about 20 years ago, and as long as I've been in teaching, there have been quite worrying statistics out there about how many teachers or head teachers are planning to leave within 5 years. I don't think those numbers have changed, so I would take that statistic with a pinch of salt. What I would say is there is no doubt that since COVID kicked in 3 years ago, lots of people, but in particular the teaching profession and in particular head teachers, have had a really, really tough time. If you think about what head teachers had to do through the pandemic, never quite knowing day in, day out how many teachers they'd have coming in, whether they could keep their schools open, what kind of education they could provide for the youngsters in their charge. So I know from talking to people in the sector, people are still absolutely shattered and just trying to get through each term.
But as you were saying, that these figures were the same before the pandemic as they are now during and after the pandemic as well. I would have thought if I was a teacher, and it would be my ambition then to be a head teacher of some very nice school, and there I would be top of my career. Why would I only spend 5 years doing that? What is it? Is it low pay? Is it conditions? What is it?
So we know that in real terms, pay at the top end of the teacher's profession has fallen slightly back in recent years. But actually, I would argue it's probably not pay that's a big thing that drives people out of the profession. In fact, typically when people leave teaching, they take a pay cut of around 10%. The stuff that really gets you down when you're in the classroom or in a school day in, day out is stuff around pupil behaviour, bureaucracy, paperwork, and also whether or not you're being supported by your leadership team, if you're a teacher, or as a head teacher, whether you're being supported by your governors and your trustees. It's those things which seem to get people down and drive them out. They're not things that require more money. They are things that require people to take the medium and long-term view and take harder decisions about enforcing behaviour standards and backing their team up rather than quick fixes.
And I do think it's interesting in the whole debate around school strikes, there's so little actually said about the children who it will affect, who of course suffered so much as a result of the pandemic. I think it was interesting to hear Catherine Burble sing over the weekend, who until last month I think was the government's social mobility czar. She's a head teacher of a really deprived school in Wembley in London. She looks after lots of kids with loads of behavioural problems. And she says most of the parents at her school do not work in the public sector. They do not have the ability to strike. They will be heavily affected by inflation eating into their wages. Yep. And it's those families who will suffer and their children who will suffer as a result of those. Really interesting, because there is no union for parents or for children to speak up in all of this.
No, there really isn't. And the strikes will disproportionately impact the very children that were disproportionately affected by COVID. And whilst lots of us can maybe work from home on Wednesday when the national strike is happening, lots of parents won't be able to work from home. And as you've just said, those most affected by the cost of living pressures are probably those that will have to take time off work to look after their children. And that, to me, that really worries me. That doesn't feel very fair.
Thanks very much indeed. Good seeing you. Thank you. Look, just front page of the Daily Mail today. Putin's threat to kill Boris. To tell us all about that, because this revelation has been made, Marco Giangeli, who's the defence editor of the Sunday Express now, with his take on this. Good morning to you, Marco. What do you make of this headline?
Good morning, Eamonn. Well, I think it's extraordinary that we get an insight of a verbatim conversation between two leaders so soon after the event. Now, look, there is a special place in hell as far as Russia is concerned for Britain. I mean, there's still a phrase talking about that meddlesome woman, and it doesn't refer to Margaret Thatcher. It refers to Queen Victoria. So that said, I don't think we should be too surprised. This is exactly the language that Putin has thrived on. This is what he has used to such great effect against Germany and France, for instance. And we know that even Jake Sullivan warned that the US was getting this type of language as well. I do think the interesting question is, why did not the Prime Minister make this known at the time? Now, let's remember the context. This was during a period where, certain countries, certain intelligence agents were trying to persuade allies, NATO members, and the rest of the world that an invasion was imminent. And they weren't being believed. And I think revealing this type of language might have swayed some minds at that point.
Yeah, really interesting. Boris Johnson's big hero, Churchill, was the one who quoted or coined the phrase, "An appeaser is one who feeds a crocodile hoping it will eat him last." Does this paint Boris as an appeaser?
I don't think you can paint Boris Johnson as an appeaser. Look, I mean, let's look at Britain's position. after the Salisbury attacks, Theresa May led the largest Russian diplomatic expulsion since the Cold War. I think Britain has pretty much been at the forefront of standing firm to Russia. There are those that never thought this invasion would come. But there are others, including in the Ministry of Defense, the Foreign Office, Downing Street, and Washington, who remember Putin's seminal speech in Munich in 2007, just before he invaded Georgia, in which he declared that the bipolar world was over. I beg your pardon, that the unipolar world was over. In other words, forget international consensus, forget everyone playing by the same rule books. And he has kept to that promise. And we knew it was coming. Unfortunately, it took an invasion to persuade others that he was serious.
Well, not only was the invasion coming, it did come, and it came about a year ago. We're reaching the 1-year anniversary. Marco, just briefly, could you sum up how it is going?
Well, I believe that I've always believed for the last few months that the situation that suits Vladimir Putin most this year would have been stalemate. Why? It's because he has already shown he cannot gain and keep ground. So his troops have retreated now. They are in a defensive position. Why is that good? He can hold on to what he has while he waits for his war of attrition to work in the West. He is hoping that the West will get fed up with spending billions of pounds. Now, of course, recent announcements show that that hope is forlorn. We've announced tanks. There is an agreement now to plan to send fighter aircrafts. Of course, that will need political green lights, and they might not come. But I think it's significant that the planning is taking place for that. And I think what that will force Putin to do is to act. So he won't be able to stay in his defensive position for much longer. But certainly, there is a feeling, for instance, that had he been able to hang on, is a sort of a status quo, that a potentially a Republican presidency next year might have seen a shift in U.S. support for Ukraine, and that would, of course, have been manna from heaven for him. Okay. I think it's a risk, and I don't think he can count on any of that now. Okay. I think Ukraine is coming.
Okay. Marco Giangianelli is the defence editor of the Sunday Express. Thank you very much indeed for your analysis. Appreciate it.
It's 7:15. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
The biggest day of industrial action to hit the UK in decades will grind much of the country to a halt this week. Up to 500,000 public service workers will protest against plummeting living standards and skyrocketing rates of inflation on Wednesday.
The 16-year-old boy charged with the murder of Holly Newton will appear in court today. The 15-year-old girl was found injured on Friday and died from her wounds in hospital. The boy, who can't be named for legal reasons, is also charged with attempted murder and possession of an offensive weapon.
New research suggests over 500,000 more people are calling in sick to work than before the pandemic. Analysis by the group Rest Less found a 20% increase amongst 50 to 64-year-olds staying at home since 2019.
Now, the Housing Secretary, Michael Gove, is today to announce a 6-week deadline for developers to sign an agreement to fix unsafe cladding.
Now, the news will reassure British home buyers who, according to the real estate website Zoopla, are moving towards flats and away from houses when it comes to where they buy. Joining us to discuss this, the editor of Estate Agent Today, Mark Schaffman. Mark, is that what's really happening, or is there just only apartments and flats available?
I mean, that is one of the issues. Good morning, everyone. Flats did fall out of fashion since the start of the pandemic. We had the stamp duty holiday between 2020 and towards the end of 2021, where you essentially get £15,000 off your tax bill for buying a property. That meant a lot buyer preference has shifted towards larger houses because people thought, well, I'll spend a bit extra, get a house instead of a flat. So that made flats less attractive. But now, they're becoming a bit more attractive because there's fewer houses to buy.
But, I mean, there must be a factor in all of this that it simply is more expensive to run a big house. Cost of living crisis, people seeing their wages going hardly anywhere. And the idea of a more efficient, smaller flat must be more appealing at this time.
Yes, that must be a big factor. I think this time last year, you probably could have got a mortgage for around 1 to 2%. And now, since the September mini-budget, we've got mortgages for around 4 to 5%. Energy bills, the typical energy bills now around £2,500, and last year it would have been a lot less. So you may have had people who were looking at big detached houses with massive bifold doors last year, but now those would cost a lot to heat. So a flat where the energy performance is probably better, it's going to be cheaper on your mortgage, it's going to be easier on your budget, I think.
Yeah. Mark, if you live in Slough, Watford, Huddersfield or places like Stockport, big demand for apartments. They're going fast. Why is that? Explain that to people.
This is an interesting one. I had to look up why some of these places were becoming attractive. Slough probably good if you're fans of The Office. But also it's on the Crossrail, on the Elizabeth line, so it's benefited from those links. And a lot of these places are still adjacent to London or major cities, so Huddersfield and Wakefield, I think, were near places like Manchester and Leeds. So they're places that are nearby to major cities, but house prices are a bit lower. I wrote down some figures for you. So London, their average house price is around £525,000, but you could live in Watford, in Hertfordshire, near where I am, and that's about half an hour into Euston, and you pay about £500,000.
I want to ask you about this announcement we're expecting from Michael Gove today. He was talking over the weekend about how the government had some responsibility for the disaster that unfolded at Grenfell, the first admission on behalf of the government, I think, in 6 years since that tragedy unfolded. But look, a lot of people in this country live in flats. They have cladding. They are concerned about this. As this report shows, more people looking to flats as a more economical option. How welcome is this idea that within 6 weeks, developers, who also have a huge role in all of this, have to sign up to make these more safe?
I mean, this is something cladding campaigners have been calling for a couple of years now. The government, in many ways, has just been sitting on its hands. Developers obviously have been resistant to do anything. The question is, they can sign these agreements, but then there has to be something in the contracts that says how long it takes for them to do it. And also, it's only on tower blocks above 11 metres. So if you're in a smaller block, you're still going to lose out, which will make it harder to sell your property or remortgage. So it's not going to help everyone.
Mark, is the appetite to buy still there? I mean, I look at flats, I look at apartments, I see the prices and I recoil in horror, particularly in London and the South East, at just how expensive they are. But they're expensive in Manchester, they're expensive in Birmingham, they're expensive in Belfast. Just really, are we getting value for money?
Well, according to research from Zoopla, demand is still up, but as you say, prices are still sky high, and there's always talk about whether a house price crash or a slowdown or a correction is coming. A lot of it will depend on mortgage rates. They were up at 6% towards the end of last year and have been dropping, but there will still be people who are on lower rates who got mortgage approvals just before the September mini-budget that will expire around the spring. So that could be a good time for people to look. But because of that, estate agents are thinking people are just hesitating. They're waiting to see what happens in the market, and that could hopefully bring prices down. But for now, if you're looking to buy it, it's pricey out there.
OK, Mark Schoffman, editor of Estate Agent Today. Good to get your perspective. Thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you.
I think I'd have been a good estate agent.
Would you? Yeah. I think I'd have enjoyed it, but I wouldn't be so good on the negotiating side.
Well, I have an interest in property. I watch all those property programmes and
same.
things, and maybe I'd be better off just with new builds, you know, selling off plan and that sort of thing. But seems quite a nice...
It certainly seems to be a good business to be in these days. You talk about the high street closing up and turning into flats. It's all just estate agents on my high street.
So would you buy a house from us? Would you buy a flat from us? If we were your estate agent, could you do business with us?
I do sometimes think I could do the tours really well. Because we've been trying to sell a house recently, and I'm always agitating to look. Did you say that? Did you mention that we've got planning permission for this? And could you,
Yes.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Do you put a smell of baking bread on?
Oh, I do the whole fresh flowers. I'm trying to make it look like a show home before every viewing, which is extremely stressful.
And do you go in? Do you clean up your house for all?
Yes, I have the cleaner, and then after the cleaner's gone, I clean up some more.
Yeah.
It's got to be. It hasn't worked, so.
Yeah. It's very nice. Very, very nice. So it's still not sold yet?
Well, we're off the market again now. We're having a little pause.
Right. Having a little pause. OK. We'll have a little pause right now. We'll go to the break. We'll come back with Paul. Quite busy weekend in sports. So much happening. And Paul will tell you all about it right after this.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamonn Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. Do you have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamonn. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamonn Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind, and we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, 7:26. We are going to bring you lots more on the programme this morning, including the latest royal news. Lady Susan Hussey has been seen in public alongside the King. It's the first time since quitting her Buckingham Palace role last year. We'll have all the details about that and a possible reconciliation between William and Harry, if successful, brokered by the Archbishop of Canterbury.
And what about this for a story? He's a personal trainer who turned into a Bollywood star. An unlikely leading man from Huddersfield finding fame in Mumbai.
It's a white personal trainer from Yorkshire, starring in Bollywood. See, we can all do it. Sky's the limit.
Did you watch Happy Valley last night?
Oh, no, I'm still a season behind, but I'm getting there. I'm halfway through season 2.
It's a bit slow last night, but anyway, it's all bubbling to next Sunday's the finale. That's when it ends, the last ever one. If you watch it, if you're a fan, you can join in any of our discussions. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk. The back page is there while we were on the commercial break, and we go to the Star first of all, and their headline is "What a load of rubbish." So this refers to Liverpool player Andy Robertson admitting the Reds are getting worse as they were kicked out of the FA Cup by Brighton last night, one of the last kicks off the game. The Mail, the Hollywood actor Ryan Reynolds' side, Wrexham, well, they suffered a last gasp FA Cup equaliser. Sheffield United snatched that one in the 95th minute. And the Express hails an emotional Novak Djokovic after he called his triumph in the Australian Open the greatest victory of his career. So that's 22 majors for him.
22.
Grand Slams.
22 Grand Slams, 10 Australian Opens. And the big story, of course, this time last year, we were talking about it, weren't we? And the fact that he was banned and he wasn't allowed to enter the country. And I tell you, a year is a long time in everything, isn't it, really, when it comes to that? Not only in tennis, but the way he was handled. He was going to be banned for 3 years. That was all overturned. It's gone back in. And you know what? It's interesting because the Australian public have very much turned. They were really anti-Novak. Obviously, because of the fact of, they were having to vaccinations, they were having to stay at home. There was lockdown there, but a lot's changed in a year. And so now he's the conquering hero. But I've got to tell you, 73, he's played 73, I think it's 73 games at the Australian Open, 73 matches. And every time he's won the first set, it's 73 in these 73 victories. Every time he's won the first set, he's gone on to win the game. And that's in every single game he's played.
I always wonder
if
you're that brilliant at a sport and it's a single-person sport, it's not a team thing, do you still get the same buzz from winning? But he clearly, he was in floods of tears, wasn't he? And do you think it's more about winning the Australian Open or equalising Nadal's record? Who's he trying to beat all the time? I'd love to know the psychology.
It is. I think it's winners, they have to win. And great, we look at Andy Murray. What makes him continue after everything that he's been through? It's that love of the game and it's the love of winning. See, I think this is where I fell down as a sports person, because it's like, OK, lost the game. That's it. I'll have another go, but they have to win.
Yeah.
And they do. And they do continue to, And he's gone through, whether he's still liked or not by the general public around the world, there was the thing with the injury, wasn't there? And he had this, they were calling it a fake injury, this hamstring. And it's like, well, he's going, he's faking it. But there's always something around him.
He's got a new following, I think, because of that vaccination thing, rightly or wrongly. I think a lot of people like him.
Absolutely. The more people are now going, we love Novak. Why? Because of this is what happened. And so he's got more fans. He's lost fans, but he's also gained more fans as well.
What's going on at Liverpool? Holders of the FA Cup, they went out to Brighton. Brighton pulled some big surprises. They're good. They're consistently good. So it was a winner in stoppage time for Brighton.
It was. The last time they played there, which was only recently, Brighton won 3-0, and Liverpool go there, they were 1-0 up, and then lose 2-1. Andy Robertson, she mentioned there in the this is the back page of the papers. Andy Robertson saying, well, actually, we are getting worse. Klopp was a lot more careful about that and saying, well, I can see these green shoots of recovery. But if you're a Liverpool fan, I think anybody else looking at it is just thinking, well, where's it coming from? Because there was a time a couple of months ago where it looked like, OK, the rot stopped, they're going to start playing well again. But now it's bad. And whether it tends to be the fact that Klopp likes to play, there's that hard press and its energy and the amount of games they played last year. I think we're talking about 80 games they played last year. It is going to have an effect somewhere along the line, and they're seeing that now.
Wrexham, well, they live to fight another day against Sheffield United in the FA Cup. And
yeah, 90 places between them. Ryan Reynolds, of course, the Hollywood star owner, and so there was a big story around that. Wrexham, non-league, so close. They were like 3 minutes away from knocking out Sheffield United, who have been on fire in the Championship. They look like they stand a great chance of going back up to the Premier League. They're second at the moment. But then equaliser right at the last gasp. So back up to Bramall Lane then, and then replay. So that's happening with them.
What about the transfer market? Anything catching your eye there?
I got a few bits and pieces. Anthony Gordon has signed for Newcastle from Everton. For £45 million, because the transfer deadline is tomorrow.
Right.
So that's tomorrow. Moises Caicedo, Ecuadorian midfielder. See, Arsenal are after him. Brighton again, because Brighton are so good. It's probably the best that Brighton have ever been, I think, ever.
Yeah.
And they've already signed Leandro Trossard, and now Arsenal are going in and offering money for Caicedo.
You've got to feel sorry for teams like Brighton and Southampton and whatever, who just end up being feeders to the bigger clubs.
This is the thing. You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. You'll get a great side, and then you're doing well, and then the vultures start hovering around trying to sign your best players, or you stay in the middle and you don't have them so good. Obviously, you want the best players. They're making a lot of money out of it. But Roberto Zerbi, the manager, has said, look, I need him to stay with us. You know, it's very important that he stays. So money talks. So we'll see what happens with Arsenal. So we'll just have to see.
Really quickly on the boxing, I had the misfortune of walking in when my husband was watching...
what?
Tommy Fury and Jake Paul.
Oh, he's watching boxing.
I was worried for a second.
No, he was watching the boxing. And they were trash-talking each other.
Yes, I saw that as well. I hated that.
Obviously, this is all about him being a YouTube star, and when I was already boxing when you were 14.
Oh, for goodness sake.
I hate all of that so much.
Listen, there was an amazing fight on Saturday night, and it was Artur Beterbiev, who is the world light heavyweight champion against Anthony Yarde, English challenger. So anyway, this fight was amazing. But before the fight, and before, let's say, the proper boxing started, we have Jake Paul comes out, and then it's Tommy Fury, and it was like all in wrestling. Do you remember? It was like seeing. It was like giant haystacks and Big Daddy facing off against each other. It was just such a load of nonsense. And there was some guy in the middle going, "What are you going to say?" And they're doing the nose-to-nose thing. You know, it's all been done before, and it was all hype. And I think it was almost putting that next to an amazing fight that was coming afterwards. But the thing is, the irony is, the actual fight that we saw at Wembley did not sell out. This one is going to be in Saudi Arabia. You've got a YouTuber in it. And it's going to make millions because people around the world are going to be more interested in that than the proper
And
fight.
Beckham gets loads of grief about going to Qatar and making loads of money on that, and they make millions from boxing in Saudi Arabia, no one bats an eyelid.
You know what? It started off like that, and Tyson Fury fought over there, and there was a few words about it, and it was sports washing, and now nobody seems to mention it. It is.
Bex could be quite annoyed about that, probably.
Absolutely.
But all that false fighting and whatever it is, was it Muhammad Ali started that?
He probably was the first.
Yeah.
He was the first because it's box office. You know, you build it
not
up.
that- oh, I just hate it.
It is.
So much.
It builds
maybe
up.
it's a female thing, but it's everything I hate. I was disgusted. I said to my husband,
But was it the fact that it was so
hate.
fake, or the fact? Is that what it was?
It was just the way all these men were all sort of shoulder to shoulder and all like it was just testosterone everywhere. Oh, it just made my.
You know what?
It was horrible.
Yeah, it was. You know what? It was fake testosterone. I see.
Yeah.
See, the thing is, I haven't got the trash talk. You see, you say that to me, and I go, "Okay, fair enough."
You and me, both our shoulders would fall off.
We wave to each other, shake hands, and our shoulders are out, and then we're out for the rest of the year.
OK, my friend, good seeing you. See you again tomorrow. Thank you very much. Thank you.
We're going to take a very quick break. After that, we're going through the papers this morning with Nigel Nelson and Dawn Neeson. You don't want to miss it.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, brilliant. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The time fast approaching 20 minutes to 8. Let's bring you up to date with the front pages of the newspapers.
The Sun is carrying Boris Johnson's claims that Vladimir Putin threatened to kill him during a phone call just ahead of Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
The Mail also leads with Putin's threat to Boris Johnson. They did involve missiles, it has to be said. And also front page Esther Ranson talking about her fight with lung cancer. So she says there, I'm fighting, but I'm still optimistic.
We wish her all the very best with that. Here's The Guardian. It's calling out Zahawi's serious failure after breaking the ministerial code not once, but multiple times.
The Times says millions of children will miss school ahead of the biggest teacher strike for 10 years. And Nigel Nelson with your papers this morning. Nigel, you'd like to begin with illegal migration, this from the Times.
Yes, and another bit of a muddle at the Home Office on the whole issue of migration. It's a plan that they're bringing in, which is the idea that murderers and rapists will be able to be dealt with rather quicker because they can't dodge modern slavery laws.
Yeah.
So it's closing a loophole. All sounds good. Trouble is, you'd imagine that if a terrorist had been identified coming into the country, however they got in, they should be picked up immediately. The same with a murderer who's a known murderer. Surely they would be extradited back to the country that they are wanted in. So we still haven't got to the bottom of how to deal with cross-channel migration, and that is to change the asylum system.
And yet, Rishi Sunak has really pledged his premiership on this, hasn't he? Getting a grip of it, and has said, judge me on it at the ballot box, and he hasn't got an awful lot of time to turn it around.
No, he hasn't. And the way he's talking about doing it, I mean, he uses the wrong words. He talks about that these people are illegal. Well, it's not illegal to cross the channel to claim asylum. And you have to claim asylum in this country, which is the draw that brings them across. So what he says is, we can send them off to a safe country or back to their homeland. And finding out where they first come from is very difficult, which is what Home Office officials keep pointing out to him. And going back to a safe country, well, which safe country apart from Rwanda?
France aren't going to have them back, are they?
Well, no, I mean, the whole thing is we lost all those agreements we had with the European Union after Brexit.
The Dublin Accord.
That's right, Dublin.
Oh, he said the B word. God.
So what happens is that until we actually get those individual agreements back in again, we can't send them back.
But they weren't hugely effective, were they, the Dublin Protocol, or whatever it was known as, at getting migrants?
It's an ongoing situation, isn't it? I mean, and it is important to a lot of people, and we have to do something. But I mean, France is a safe country. I know it's a cliche, and we always say that, but France is a safe country. And okay, I have another story seamlessly linked to this one. This is in the Daily Star, and this is smuggling gangs off a route out of the UK as well. So not only are they coming over here, we're also getting rid of them. This is a chap called Mohammed Mokka Hossain, who is a ringleader of a people smuggling gang. He's just pleaded guilty to facilitating illegal migration. But what he's doing as well, he's actually smuggling people out of the country when they have been found to have fouled in their asylum process, or they are criminals. So there's one story here about 9 people found in the back of a lorry going out of the country. So it's literally running an illegal travel agent.
Yeah.
But it's just like, look, as Nigel's quite rightly said, the whole thing is an absolute mess, but no one seems to be able to do anything about it.
Talking about absolute messes, the King's coronation, when it comes up in May. So, from what I read over the weekend, Nigel, it seems to be that the King's camp seem to be making conciliatory waves and noises towards Harry's camp. What do you read into it?
Well, what it seems to be is a bit of a Barney between the King and the heir to the throne, Charles and William, where King Charles wants Harry to be there at the coronation with Meghan, and Prince William doesn't. That seems to be the sum total of it. The King's argument would appear to be, from the papers this morning, that it'll be much more of a distraction if Harry isn't there than if he is. Now, far be it from me to disagree with the sovereign, but I'd have thought it'd be the other way round.
Let's take a vote on this. You think it would be better off not having the pair of them there?
Absolutely.
I tend to agree with you, Isabel.
I'm in agreement.
I think King Charles should rise above the pettiness and have them both
she's
there.
She's going to write another book. There's going to be another...
Yeah, I know. But I think Charles needs to be the bigger man here, and I think he needs to rise above the pettiness and the squabbling that Harry and Meghan thrive on. And I also think the other issue here is that if he's not here, he will be paid a vast amount of money to commentate for the American networks, and therefore will be all over the place talking about...
Surely he would.
OK, I've changed my mind.
Surely he would. Surely he would.
But the coronation would be overshadowed by the presence of Harry and Meghan.
Well,
everyone would be watching their body language and so on.
The Queen's funeral wasn't overshadowed by their presence. To be fair, everyone feared it would, but they were quite dignified.
Yeah.
I mean, they...
But how do you sit there if you are Camilla, or if you're William, if you're Catherine, and she and he have slagged you off publicly on various talk shows, in their books,
because you become the bigger person. You rise above it. Look,
I'm a puny person, I am.
You are not. I've heard about like you.
big thing.
But the thing is, you don't sink to their level. And I think, you know, Charles is king. He should act like a king, and I think he should rise above, as I said, the squabbling and the pettiness.
I'm with you now. I've changed
Thank
my
you,
mind.
team girl.
You've won me over.
Excellent.
But interesting that Archbishop of Canterbury is being brought in the kind of John Major role.
Yes.
Remember how John Major was brought in to try and reconcile, or at least mediate between Charles and Diana. Well, now the Archbishop of Canterbury is being brought in to try and mediate between Wills and Harry.
Yeah, I'm probably a very good person to go and do that.
Although, wasn't there some recollections may vary whole thing that involved the Archbishop of Canterbury when he said he secretly married them, and then he came out and said, actually, that's not true.
Yes, exactly.
I wonder if Harry might already be a bit miffed with the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Well, they should have said that he secretly married them, because he couldn't. He's a priest.
illegal.
He can't do things like that.
Right, Sam Smith, Dom.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so
let's talk
he
about...
says he was spat on in
No,
the street.
no, you're wrong. Hold on.
Right,
Hold on.
okay, you explain.
You actually broke the golden rule. You referred to Sam Smith as he.
Oh, right.
You
right.
can't do that now, Eamonn. Come on, get
I'm
down
supposed
with
to
the
say they.
kids. They.
But he's not a plural.
Look, honestly, Nigel
is
and
plural.
I have just had this discussion. It's like I would hate to be teaching English in school at the moment, because how do you teach grammar? Any case, Sam Smith has a new album and the new pop video out, and this has gone mad over the weekend. It's only released 2 days ago. It's got 1.6 million views in 2 days on their YouTube. And the new album's called Gloria, if you're interested. But it is a very, very raunchy, sexy, very, very near the knuckle pop video, and there's much debate going on about age restrictions and should young children. You're looking at some of the tamer bits here now. Yes, some of the outfits aren't that flattering, it has to be said.
Yeah, it's a bit Danny LaRue, isn't it?
Well, yeah, there's lots of references, and it talks about chopping lines as well, and I don't know what he's referring to there, obviously. But lots of debate about young children will be watching this, and it's a bit too near the knuckle. However, surely this is put on earth. Pop videos are put on earth to do what pop videos do, which is to sell fairly average music. Pop videos have always done that. I mean, Madonna did it, Blurred Lines. All the rap artists pretty much have very, very near the knuckle, over-the-top sexy videos involving drugs and not many clothes, etc., etc. So,
but I'm interested in this. But I'm not so interested in the music. I'm interested in this. But they were spat on in the street over my pronouns.
Yes. Well, but he has made a big deal about it. He came out as non-binary in 2019, and he has given an interview to plug this new album called Gloria, which is a woman's name, so that also confuses me. Anyway, and he is talking about the reaction from their... I said he, and oh my God.
It's hard.
It's very hard. They are talking about reaction from their family, which has been fine. Don't complain that I'm just playing by the rules here. But they say they have been treated appallingly on the streets with people spitting at them because of their... I'm giving up now. Their attitude. Post the videos online if you want.
After a while, you can get used to it. I write they now in the newspaper, and I do it regularly, and it doesn't seem to jar. The more you get used to it, it's fine. And also bear in mind that it's not they is. They is a plural, and that's right, but so is you, even if it means singular.
Yes,
so you is a plural verb as well.
But do you think people... I'm not condoning spitting ever, absolutely deplorable behaviour, but do people object to him because of his pronouns, or do people object to him because of his hypocrisy, or the way he's been the big driver trying to change the Brits, and then sure enough all of the women have been excluded from the top list? I mean, there is a legitimate argument from a wing of what would be described as TERFs, aren't there? These women who are...
Feminists, as we used to call them. We're not transphobic, we don't hate anybody, no.
Controversial rather than the fact that he's
well, this is it. The non-binary, non-gender specific, whether it's a pop awards or acting awards. And the thing is, when you do this, so it's like one category for whatever sex you want to be, or no sex whatsoever, it's always the men, I'm sorry, I can still use that word, it's always the men that get all the nominations and the women lose out.
OK, Dawn and Nigel, you'll be nominated again in 45 minutes' time. They'll be back with more from the papers for the moment. Thank you very much indeed.
The time is coming up to, in fact, it is 10 to 8. Let's bring you up to date with the top stories this hour.
The Prime Minister will announce a 2-year plan for emergency care today as the NHS continues to face severe pressures. Rishi Sunak's £1 billion blueprint promises 800 new ambulances, 5,000 more hospital beds, as well as expanding urgent care to people's homes.
Boris Johnson says Vladimir Putin threatened to kill him just weeks before Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The former Prime Minister told the BBC Putin warned him it would only take a minute if he used a missile.
A major search is underway after a woman has gone missing in Lancashire while walking her dog. 45-year-old Nicola Bully was last seen 2 days ago on a footpath in St Michael's on Wire. Police are urging anyone with information to come forward. This is an interesting one. Academics, journalists, politicians who criticised the government were reportedly spied upon, according to a new report.
Well, civil liberties organisation Big Brother Watch has obtained documents that show agencies whose job is to tackle hostile state misinformation also targeted critics of the government.
Joining us to dive into this in more detail, Head of Research and Investigations at Big Brother Watch, Jake Herford. Jake, good morning to you. I'm sure none of this surprises you.
Not at all, unfortunately. It was an investigation that was built on some suspicions we had, and the more we delved into it, the more we found.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting, though, because there will be people who will say, look, we saw what happened with American elections. We've seen how social media is used by some to spread misinformation. And there has to be somebody, I suppose the big question is who's the arbiter, of saying, well, that's actually dangerous to spread that stuff. It's actually going to have consequences. It needs to be flagged.
So I understand why people are concerned about sort of dangerous kind of information on social media, but what we found is ordinary criticism of the government was being classified as misinformation and treated as such, and that's why it's really alarming. It's that it's ill-defined often, and that line between political dissent and what is actually false was blurred, perhaps intentionally, perhaps by accident by these units. So what you have is the real threat of censorship and monitoring. Someone disagreeing with you isn't someone being wrong. They are different things. We need to be very clear about that.
I mean, I've been a victim of this. I challenged a reporter when they said that there was no evidence that 5G was harmful to us. I said, says who? And she couldn't tell me it said who. And I just said, well, they used to say smoking wasn't harmful to you. And I said, you should always question the narrative. The Cabinet Office complained to ITV about this, and so did vested interests in 5G. And basically the rest is history. That was that. So the power that these people seem to wield under the idea of, I mean, my point is you should always, as a journalist, be able to question the narrative, and you should always be just cynical about things. And if somebody proves you otherwise, then fair and well. But just under Dominic Cummings, I thought the Cabinet Office was, it was just like a state regime. It was just like, imperialistic.
I think that's definitely the case. I mean, Mr Cummings himself, there was a rapid response unit, which is the Cabinet Office misinformation unit.
Yes.
They put together a document themselves when he was given evidence in front of the Select Committee. It's been actually in operation for a number of years, very recently closed down. So it wasn't just under him, but there's definitely that kind of idea. I mean, the rapid response unit within the Cabinet Office existed to promote sort of government information. There's an example back from 2018 when there were the chemical weapons attack in Syria. The Alex Aiken, who helped set this unit up, admitted in an interview that, yes, we got search engine results, we basically manipulated them and managed to promote up government-backed information because they didn't like some of the things that came up when you Googled it in the first place. So some of it is quite sinister or sounds quite sinister. The thing is that there's a complete lack of transparency of what these units do, and that's a major problem. If, like you were saying before, if they were open about we are tackling what is genuine violent extremism or genuine hostile foreign state action, there would be a lot of justification for it, but the lack of transparency doesn't help either.
But Jake, tell me this: when we say that the state is watching and listening to you, I mean, they're putting these opinions out in the public domain. Everybody's watching and listening to those views. There's nothing particularly sinister about the fact that the government's listening to what society is saying, is there?
Absolutely not. I mean, governments engage in media monitoring all the time.
Depends what they do about it.
Exactly, it's what they do about it.
But have we got any evidence they did do anything about these people that spoke about things that were controversial?
So in Parliament, ministers have got up and said they... so the Department for Culture, Media and Sport have a unit called Counter-Disinformation Unit. That has a hotline to big tech. They have a special relationship with the platforms where they can pressure and ask things to be taken down. They refused to tell me a number of times through freedom of information laws Other MPs have asked in Parliament, and ministers refuse to ask how many things they have taken down. So clearly, there's that relationship, and they can pressure. We've seen the Daily Mail back in November 2020 questions of the modelling behind the COVID lockdowns. The Cabinet Office pressured the Department of Health to have a go at them on Twitter. They claimed in public it was because it was misleading. Privately, documents I've seen, they're saying it's because it's going to affect compliance with restrictions. So there is quite a lot of power behind this. But you're absolutely right in terms of we don't know what's going on.
So
and that's
what would you like to see going
access.
on? What would you like to see being done about all of this?
The Counter-Disinformation Unit must be suspended and a full investigation into its activities and its relationships with big tech. Because like we said, tackling genuine hostile foreign states, absolutely fine. But when the guise of misinformation is used to put people like David Davis MP under surveillance, Julie Hartley-Brewer from your rival broadcaster, pages and pages of documents about her, that isn't countering misinformation, that's monitoring dissent, and that's not okay.
OK, well, look, we haven't got a right of reply from the CDU or the RRU. We will endeavour to do that, but we do really appreciate your time on the programme this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You be careful what you're asking.
I've got to let them defend their case.
Pages on Julia Hartley-Brewer, they'll have books on us, won't they? Yeah.
Stay with us. We're going to have more for you on Nadeem Zahawi.
Are we allowed to ask questions about him, aren't we?
Always.
Maybe that's...
We'll have more after the break. Stay with us.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous.
Just get on with it.
Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
The Prime Minister faces questions over his judgment following the sacking of Nadhim Zahawi.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on Monday, the 30th of January. You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. Pressure mounting on the Prime Minister over what he knew and when following the sacking of Nadhim Zahawi for breaching the ministerial code. The PM made his decision within an hour of receiving a report into the former party chairman's tax affairs.
The government has announced support for struggling emergency care services in the NHS. The £1 billion proposal will be used to fund thousands of new hospital beds and 800 new ambulances.
Buy now, pay later, as the Fraser Group, who own Evans, Cycles, House of Fraser and Sports Direct, prepare to lend customers up to £2,000 on credit, will weigh up the dangers of shopping beyond your means.
And from Yorkshire to Mumbai, we'll meet the personal trainer turned unlikely leading man who is changing the face of Bollywood films.
Thanks for getting in touch today. We were talking about the proliferation of flats and apartments around the country. So many pubs and shops being converted into apartments now, and Tracy says flats are great until the next pandemic and lockdown. Being cooped up all day with no outside space would be absolutely brutal.
Lots of you getting in touch on Zahawi as well this morning. Lawrence, pretty unforgiving of him, saying he's nothing but a thief who got caught. I have to say, we should stress that the HMRC found him to be careless rather than actually being a fraud. Jane saying, one word sums up Zahawi case, greed. Barry in Ascot says, on another note, do you think Nadhim Zahawi will sign up for I'm a Celebrity? Wouldn't say that's impossible. And Margaret says, I've not got a lot of confidence with Rishi. He has no idea what he's doing. I dread to think where the country is heading with this Tory government. So not an awful lot of support out there for either of the
not a lot of support for Sam Smith either and his pronouns. A lot of people say they like his music, but Stephen Kent, Sam Smith is attention-seeking. Robin Folkestone, I accept some people are different. I do not accept the English language being altered to suit a minority group. In other words, that it would be called they.
Yeah, so keep those thoughts coming in. We love to hear from you throughout the course of the programme. But it is our top story this hour. The Prime Minister is facing questions about his judgment following the sacking of Nadhim Zahawi over the weekend.
Rishi Sunak made his decision within an hour of receiving a report that found that the Conservative chairman had breached the ministerial code multiple times in relation to his taxes.
Well, earlier we spoke to Health Minister Helen Whately, who told us the Prime Minister has done the right thing.
The Prime Minister made the decision to remove Nadhim Zahawi from his position in government. He did that once he got the report in from the independent ethics advisor, which was very clear about what had or hadn't happened, and so the Prime Minister rightly made that decision.
He'd made the admission that he'd paid this penalty to HMRC. We knew that he had been Chancellor when he's being investigated by them. It didn't need an independent panel for the Prime Minister to take the action, did it?
Actually, it's a pretty serious thing for somebody to be removed from their job as a minister in the government, and something like that should follow a fair and proper process. That's why the Prime Minister asked his independent ethics advisor to look into it. So Laurie Magnus did that and then set out very clearly his judgment, which was then the basis on which the Prime Minister made the decision to remove Nadhim Zahawi.
Well, that was Helen Whately speaking to us a little bit earlier on.
Now, some call for Mr Zahawi to stand down as an MP. We've been speaking to people in his constituency, a very nice constituency, Stratford upon... Which you do like the architecture.
I do, it's beautiful. It's where Shakespeare's from.
Where Shakespeare's from, yeah. Stratford upon Avon. And we're finding out what folk there feel about all of this and him.
He broke the rules, he deserves to get the sack, doesn't he? Everybody has got to pay their taxes, he didn't do it right, so he deserves a sack. Simple as that, same as anybody else, really.
I think he should have resigned, really, and it's taken a long time. And again, I think, it's been this big delay in is he going to go, isn't he going to go? Nobody actually makes any decision until the public, opinion becomes so strong that they think they've got to do something about it, really. So I wish they'd called a general election, actually, because I think, we've got another 2 years, haven't we, of this mess, really. And, I'd quite like to have a bit of a change.
I think he had it coming to him. He should have.
I think he should have been
resigned.
honest.
He should have resigned at the beginning of the week.
And it's not the first time he's had question marks about his team.
Well, joining us now is our political correspondent, Tom Harwood. Good morning to you. Look, Tom, the Prime Minister will very much be pointing to his swift action in relation to the independent report, but there will be significant questions, won't there, about his own judgment, how much he knew, how much was he told, and why he wasn't swifter to act?
There certainly will be, and not least there will be from the public and indeed journalists in Newcastle this morning, where the Prime Minister is hosting a PM Connect event. So we should be able to, a little bit later on, see exactly how he answers some of those questions directly. However, we do have a hint in terms of what we know his position has been up until this point, the position that he set out at Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday, which is he believes in due process and didn't want to prejudge the outcome of an inquiry that was needed to establish the facts. And it must be said that Sir Laurie Magnus, the independent advisor on ministerial standards, has done this inquiry, has carried out this work in record time. If we look back to other similar sorts of inquiries that we've seen in previous months or indeed years, the Dominic Raab inquiry is going on now into its almost its third month. Of course, the Priti Patel investigation took many, many months. The Sue Gray investigation, I think, took about half my lifetime. So this was a very, very quickly expedited investigation. And I think that probably helps the Prime Minister's case in terms of saying that he should have waited for that due process before making a final decision. But you're right, there will be questions in terms of exactly what the Prime Minister did know at what point. We've been given the impression, we've been led to believe by Number 10 that the Prime Minister hadn't really spoken that much to Nadhim Zahawi through the course of the last few months.
Tom, I'm interested, who do you think might replace Zahawi as the new Tory party chairman? Some speculation that it could be Boris Johnson. I think Jacob Rees-Mogg, a big fan of that idea.
Yeah, I think that's unlikely, the former Prime Minister being such a large figure as he is. And frankly, the position of the chairman of the Conservative Party being quite a poisoned chalice. We've got local elections coming up in May, and these will be the first big national test of whether or not the Conservatives' big gap in the polls, that 20-point gulf between the Conservative Party and the Labour Party, it'll be that first big test to see whether those polls really are reflected right across the country. And judging by all indicators, it's not going to be a pretty night for the Conservative Party. Does any MP really want to be the man or woman who will be sort of leading that charge, who will be responsible for that result? To some extent, it might not be the most welcome job in government. So some of the speculation that we've seen, whether it's Boris Johnson or Grant Shapps or Penny Mordaunt, these are people who might be happier actually where they are. I think in terms of looking for a potential new chair of the Conservative Party, we might want to look one rung below full cabinet ministers or big names that we might all have at the tip of our tongues. We might want to look at those junior ministerial ranks to see if that hole could be plugged in a more clean way without a need for a big, wider reshuffle. That being said, the fact that Rishi Sunak isn't rushing in to make a replacement very quickly, the fact that there is an interim chair there in the meantime might mean that we are waiting for some sort of larger reshuffle down the line, and it might not be very, very quick, this replacement at all.
And Tom, you're talking about the May elections, but I'm very interested that Rishi Sunak wheeled out Isaac Levido at the Chequers cabinet meeting last week, talking about how a general election next year is eminently winnable, but they have to remain laser-focused. Distractions like this, though, will not help.
No, it certainly won't. The big message from Isaac Levido, the man who helped the Conservatives win that enormous victory in 2019, was message discipline. Of course, the Conservatives were incredibly disciplined in 2019. Get Brexit done, 20,000 police officers and the rest of it. There were the lines to take. Now, it doesn't really seem that the whole Conservative Party is particularly united behind the Prime Minister's message, although it is clear what the Prime Minister's message is. No doubt we'll be hearing it later from him today at his latest PM Connect event, the 5 top priorities, which no doubt will be drilled into all of our brains over the course of the next 2 years. That's the sort of message discipline that is needed for the Conservative Party to have a hope. And something else that Isaac Levido said was it's a very narrow path to victory, but there is a possible path to victory. So it all depends whether or not the Rishi Sunak ministry can sort of put these scandals behind it, connect with the professionalism that he promised on the steps of number 10, and deliver that sort of disciplined party that, frankly, we haven't seen up to this point.
Yeah, and of course the Lib Dems calling for Nadeem Zahawi to stand down as an MP. The last thing the Tories will want is a by-election in Stratford-upon-Avon. I suppose I just finally wonder, on a personal note, whether or not you're surprised to see Nadeem Zahawi so lacking in contrition in his attack on the media as well.
It's interesting. I think that everyone was surprised by the speed of the conclusion of this investigation. I think that Nadeem Zahawi seems personally a bit affronted by it, that he hasn't really been able to make his case. And I know that he wanted to put across some of the things that he's been feeling in the last few weeks, that he's been sort of unfairly maligned or misrepresented. And I think that did come across in the letter that perhaps was a little ill-judged there. The attack on the media specifically, perhaps that wasn't the best avenue to do it. Clearly, he does feel that there had been inappropriate media commentary, particularly that headline from The Independent a few days ago saying the noose around his neck tightens. That's the sort of imagery that I think would be roundly condemned were it written about an MP on the left. And I think that he and the people around him have been particularly concerned about him and his family's safety. So to some extent, there is that angle to it all. But certainly in that letter that didn't sort of acknowledge any wrongdoing, didn't apologise, didn't show contrition, perhaps that was ill-judged.
OK, Tom Harwood, thanks very much indeed. Now, in other news this morning, a coroner has ruled that a 26-year-old man would probably have survived a serious infection had he been allowed to see a GP in person. An inquest into the law student David Nash's death concluded a face-to-face appointment could have saved his life. Instead, he died from brainstem swelling at hospital more than 2 weeks after first reporting his symptoms. Anna Riley has all the details.
David Nash was a talented musician who hoped to become a barrister, but at just 26 years old, his life was tragically cut short. He died in November 2020 from brainstem swelling, but if he'd been able to see a GP, he'd most likely have survived. Instead, after finding a lump on his neck, David spoke to his GP practice in Leeds 4 times over a 19-day period, but wasn't seen in person.
I'm very fine, my sinuses, my back and my neck, and I've got temperature as well. I've had it for about a week. Yeah, I've had it for about last Friday, and I feel the temperature, just these pains are really bad.
An inquest found the failure to give David a face-to-face GP appointment in the days before his death was a missed opportunity. His parents, Anne and Andrew Nash, welcome the findings, but feel David was let down.
Care definitely from the practice was very poor. They didn't join up the consultations. They didn't elude the right information from him. But he gave them all the information, but they then didn't use it to make a diagnosis. And yeah, they failed him. He became so unwell at the time he got to A&E. He was so unwell, and although they tried, he was critically ill when he arrived there. So.
Now, they have recognised their failures. It's just such a shame a young lad's lost his life
and that they didn't recognise at the time because all the signals were there.
Andrew and Anne believe other families are still suffering unnecessarily, with essential medical appointments still being carried out over the phone rather than in person.
The only positive that can come from it is that people do listen, and I fear it is still going on. So
yeah, the verdict of Coroner Abigail Coombs is a powerful message because it adds to the debate of access to GPs. And as I say, the only positive that can come out is that if other GP practices can learn from this mistake, I don't think it'll ever happen again at David's GP practice. They've learned from it, but clearly it's better that everyone learns from it and that future deaths are prevented, because going through this has been dreadful.
David was under the care of Burley Park Medical Centre at the height of the pandemic, when practices were seeing large numbers of patients remotely. They said, "We offer our deepest condolences and apologies to David Nash's family and friends, and fully accept the outcome of the coroner's inquest. Our practice now has a policy to ensure that patients with appropriate clinical presentations are automatically referred to a face-to-face appointment, as do patients who have had multiple contacts with the practice." David will forever be cherished by those that love him, and his parents hope that his death will not be in vain. Anna Riley, GB News, Nantwich.
Really tragic case that. I would love to know your views at home, what you think about that. If you've had difficulties as well getting in touch with the GP. We did ask the Health Minister this morning her response. She didn't want to talk about individual cases, but of course she is proposing today an increase in these so-called digital wards, these online wards where you are treated from home but over the internet. Let us know your thoughts, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Right, with the time at 8:16, let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories. Last-minute talks between teaching unions and the government are being held today in an effort to avoid further walkouts in England and Wales, with teachers planning to strike on Wednesday. Members of the teaching union will meet with the Education Secretary, Gillian Keegan, after previous talks failed to break the deadlock. Boris Johnson says Vladimir Putin threatened to kill him just weeks before Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The former Prime Minister told the BBC Putin warned him it would only take a minute if he used a missile strike. A major search is underway after a woman has gone missing in Lancashire while walking her dog. 45-year-old Nicola Bully was last seen 2 days ago on a footpath in St Michael's on Wyre, and police are urging anyone with information to come forward. Now, the former Lady-in-Waiting, Lady Susan Hussey, has been pictured with the King for the first time since resigning from her Buckingham Palace role last November. It comes as the King reportedly asks the Archbishop of Canterbury to broker a deal to allow Harry to attend the coronation. Well, let's speak to the royal historian and broadcaster Rafe Hadel-Mancu for his thoughts on all of this. And look, the royal family have been very, very close to Lady Susan Hussey for decades. Indeed, her service to Her Majesty would be sort of up there with the top 5 ladies in waiting, probably. Were you surprised to see them shoulder to shoulder at church at Sandringham yesterday?
No, because we understood that after she made this meeting with Ngozi Fulani and, in my opinion, needlessly apologised to her, after that happened, we understand that she is now going to be invited to the coronation as well. So she's gradually being invited back into the royal fold. As you say, she's Prince William's godmother. She was part of HMS Bubble, which was the protective shield around the Queen, and she accompanied the Queen alone to the funeral of the Duke of Edinburgh, so very much part of the royal household. She's been treated very shabbily by everybody in all parties, in almost all parties in this, and I would hope actually that one might hope at some point in the future she'll be reinstated to her role as Lady of the Household, because at the end of the day, anyone who knows this lady knows she doesn't have a racist bone in her body. You just have to go to the church she attends every Sunday in Kennington with a majority black congregation. All she was doing was going about her duties, you know, and if you arrive at an event dressed up like an extra from The Lion King, don't be surprised if someone asks you about where you're from, particularly if her job is to actually find out background information on somebody, so when a member of the royal family comes, they can be introduced correctly.
I mean, I don't think she was necessarily necessarily looking like a bit part from a musical. I mean, she was wearing her national dress.
No, it wasn't national. She wasn't wearing national dress. Actually, she was wearing an outfit she put together as an ensemble.
Okay, but I mean, which was from the West Africa, presumably, which is her heritage. And we won't get into an argument about that, but I think that could be contested. I'm interested, though, in what's happening with the coronation. The King has spoken frequently of his love for Prince Harry. He's clearly worried about the tension between his sons. Do you think the Archbishop of Canterbury will be able to solve this?
Well, it's not the first time that Justin Welby has been drafted in. In September, he was brought in to try to reconcile things to a degree after the Queen's death. However, on this occasion, Prince William seems very resistant, and I can certainly understand why. The logic from Buckingham Palace seems to be that, essentially, not having Harry there is more dangerous than having him there.
Do you agree with that?
And I can't see the logic there. For my mind, the adage really should be out of sight, out of mind.
Right.
All focus must be on the coronation, must be on the King and Queen. And I don't see why they would want to risk photographs of Harry and Meghan challenging photographs of the newly crowned King and Queen on the front pages. It would be a major distraction.
And that is William's view in all of this, isn't it? But, I mean, you only have to look at the funeral of Her Majesty the Queen. They towed the line, didn't they? They did as they were expected to do. And the danger is if they don't come to the coronation, that Harry will be tapped up by one of the big American networks, that they will be slighted, that will give them lots of material for future expositions of the royal family. And he's already threatened, hasn't he, that there's a second book that he could pen. I mean, it's a risk to keep him out of the fold.
Yeah, I mean, there's no simple solution to any of this, because if they come, one of the risks, and I think this is a risk Prince William understands, is that they'll try to grandstand on the occasion, perhaps go to a deprived London borough, be seen with at food banks and so forth, and again, trying to take the limelight away from what is actually the most important constitutional and ceremonial event that we have. It's been 70 years since the last coronation, but this is much bigger than attending a royal wedding or attending a funeral. This is really about the new king coming into place, making his mark upon the monarchy, putting his own stamp and introducing him to the world. And actually, these events are the rare occasions when a nation is supposed to come together in a positive atmosphere, in a positive vibe. And this just brings a dark cloud and a negativity and a distraction from what should be a very happy occasion. The other point that's very much worth making is also that Prince Harry's not going to just come over out of his goodwill. He's going to want concessions for coming over. Now, we know that he said in the past that in his interviews, he's wanted an apology from the royal family as a prerequisite to a reconciliation. And I think one of the worries also is that he's going to demand that for the coronation, demand that his titles not be removed from him in the future. I mean, for someone who detests the royal family, he's very keen on his royal titles, we know that. So there's a lot of issues here, which I think... I mean, we know, for example, that two-thirds of the British public apparently want him to attend the coronation. But I think if the question was actually phrased, should the king make concessions for Prince Harry to attend the coronation, I think the result might be very different.
But let's not forget, the king is head of the Church of England, and the Archbishop of Canterbury, of course, would be promoting Christian values and at its core would want to see reconciliation happen between the brothers. I suppose the question is whether or not they're able to do that. And I suppose we'll just have to see. Time will tell on that one. OK, Rafe Hayden-Manku, always good to get your thoughts. Thanks very much indeed. We're going to take a really quick break. After that, we'll be talking about Fraser Group. They own Sports Direct, House of Fraser, and they are finalising plans to lend customers as much as £2,000. I'd love to know your views on this. We'll ask if buy now, pay later has perhaps gone a little bit too far. See you in a moment.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamonn Holmes, back on the TV
Surprised
with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamonn. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamonn Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind, and we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
27 minutes past 8 o'clock. A very good morning to you. You're tuned in to breakfast here on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel, on radio, on television, online.
Still to come, a really fascinating story. A personal trainer from Yorkshire, as you can see, a white guy there, has become the first British white man to star in a Bollywood blockbuster. We'll be speaking to him in around 15 minutes' time.
And just after 9, Andrew Pierce giving you his take on all the big stories of the day, including the coronation and who will be invited, Zahawi sacking, and that £1 billion fund for more hospital beds and ambulances, but not necessarily for the staff. And you can join in any of the discussions, which you have been doing. Chris says, while trying to find my destination at an East Surrey hospital, I went past the ambulance park and noted the manufacturers of the ambulances. They were mostly either Renault, Mercedes, with a scattering of Fiat. There was no obvious British ambulance there. Jeff says, I hope the taxpayers' money is going to be used for these new ambulances. It's going to companies in the UK so that they will support British workers and not go to foreign vehicle firms and their workers.
Keep your thoughts coming. So Fraser's Group, they own brands such as House of Fraser and Sports Direct, is now finalising plans to give customers the ability to borrow up to £2,000 by combining buy now, pay later purchases.
But should you be buying things on credit, especially if you can't afford them? Consumer and retail expert Kate Hardcastle is here to tell us more. Well, we sort of know the answer to that. The thing is, I'm just wondering why everyone's getting their knickers in a twist about this one, Kate, because it's always been this way, has it not?
Good morning, both. Yes, you're right, Eamonn. As per, of course, credit facilities have been offered by retailers as a way to create affordability for items that we can't afford. Now, my nan and granddad ran a little shop in Yorkshire, and they would offer things on tick because that's how it worked. And from then on, I think there's always been the opportunity to borrow when we've got an affordability challenge. But it's becoming more prevalent, it's becoming a lot easier, and it's becoming certainly something that it becomes part of our checkout process online without many people even perhaps realising what's going on. I think that's why it's always worthwhile making sure that your finances and your financial education are probably up to date with the latest trends.
Update us, educate us. What should people be aware of if they are thinking of using a BNPL, buy now, pay later?
So you're quite right, Isabel. BNPL is simply buy now, pay later, and a lot of these have been afforded as almost like a bridging loan at the point of checkout online. It looks quite innocent, and it doesn't certainly seem to flag up all the terms and conditions that come with it. It will offer you the opportunity to maybe pay over a short period, like 3 months. And some people who are really finance savvy have been using them to get maybe fashion items delivered at home, try them on, maybe buy a couple of sizes and not feel the hit on their bank account when they then return those items. But as you know, unless you are really in control of finances, unless you can really afford it before you go through that checkout, it can become a concern then if you can't meet the borrowing requirements. A lot of people have met then the unfortunate news that these buy now, pay later schemes can start accruing interest, can start coming with late fines, and indeed can start to affect your credit record, which if you're just on the verge of maybe trying to buy a new vehicle, maybe getting an additional loan, mortgage, rent, your credit is everything when it comes to that. So it's all about understanding why perhaps you wouldn't use the cash in the bank right there to pay for that item instead.
Yeah, well, I suppose it depends if you've got any cash in the bank, really. But I look back at my growing up and, gosh, we would never have had a new TV if it wasn't for renting them or new furniture, ever have a car. It was always, buy now, pay later. But there are other ways, aren't there? I was always a great fan of Christmas card clubs or Christmas clubs, where you would save up the money and then you would take it out. We used to get toys that way. And credit unions, of course, are another interesting way of being able to borrow money.
I think the main thing is that we've got a lot of young people taking on this borrowing. They don't necessarily understand or feel comfortable with the finances. And I'm just going to go back to the record here. We do need better education in schools when it comes to your day-to-day finances, how to make and budget and make a wage go further. Certainly, I understand completely that if your washing machine breaks down or something essential and you just don't have the funds for it, we're going to have to look into borrowing facilities. But it's trying to do it so that it doesn't compound the pressure. And at this time of year, we always see sky-high figures when it comes to borrowing. But this year particularly, because that cost of living crisis has really eaten away at people's day-to-day wages. That's meant that if there's been anything left in the bank, it's certainly not been enough to pay for something that's perhaps been a shock to the system, like a car repair. And I think it's all about going online maybe, or speaking to friends, just talking about it, trying to work out what's the best thing for you in your circumstances. I think definitely reading the small print, Eamonn, is something we've just got to flag up here, because some of these checkout facilities are really easy to use before you perhaps truly understand what you're getting into. And the Fraser Group, just like any other retailer, they're just trying to buy into the zeitgeist almost. They're trying to make sure that they're offering the latest trend for their customers, and you can understand that. And I'm sure that they will ensure their financial products are regulated. But at the same time, it's really important these retailers maybe look to do that educational piece. What would this mean to you? How much will this cost you every month? And what are the things that happen perhaps if you can't then afford these payments?
Yeah.
The regulators have a role in all of this as well, don't they? Because, of course, we should have learnt the lessons of the credit crunch 2008. We were told, weren't we, that the watchdogs were going to be super hyper-vigilant about these sorts of things. If the Fraser Group have got the green light from them, then us consumers can only trust in that, can't we?
You're right, Isabel, but, since 2008, we've got a whole nation and a whole new generation of shoppers, and they're using shopping they're shopping so differently, they're using these facilities so differently. And it was just last year we got news in terms of those buy now, pay later schemes that up to a third of people were really starting to struggle with some of the payments that they thought would be easier just a couple of months ago. Now, that could be the brightest person who's worked out the finances, but then actually the cost of food or the cost of fuel's gone up so much, it just actually does become then really painful to pay back. So I think what we're saying is, it's that sensible thing. If you can't afford it right now, perhaps look at re-commerce, look at maybe selling some things before you buy the item. Just look at other ways before you just get straight into it. Everything can change in a sliding doors moment.
Yeah.
So true.
Affordability is the key, and worry about the small print and what happens when it goes wrong. Thanks, Kate. Thanks for shedding light on all of that. When I look back at my life, I don't think I'd have had anything without hire purchase, pay now, buy, what is it, buy now, pay later?
Yeah, BNPL.
I wouldn't have had a car, I wouldn't have had a house, I wouldn't have had, there's lots of things I wouldn't have had.
I suppose technically it's a mortgage, a BNPL. It is, isn't it? Yeah.
For 35 years.
Yeah, forever. All right, look, we're going to take a quick break. After that, Nigel Nelson and Dawn Neeson will be back for one last look through the papers with us this morning. See you in a moment.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you know, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Oh, and with the time at 8:38, the front pages today shape up like this.
The Sun is carrying Boris Johnson's claims that Vladimir Putin threatened to kill him during a phone call ahead of Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Here's the Mail. It also leads with that Putin threat to Boris Johnson. Esther Ranson, front page, talking about her fight against lung cancer. We wish her well.
The Guardian's calling out Zahawi's serious failure after breaking the ministerial code not once, but multiple times.
The Times leads with the sacking. They say millions of children will miss school as well on Wednesday ahead of the biggest teachers' strike for 10 years. We'll have the papers. Dawn, you want to start with the Esther Ranson situation and her admission that she has lung cancer?
I do. The lovely Esther has made the front pages of many of the papers today, revealing the fact that at 82 she has been diagnosed with secondary lung cancer, which basically means it has spread. She's revealing this fact because she said it was getting increasingly difficult to go to hospital appointments and be treated without people knowing. So she's come out and she's just being honest about what she's going through now. And obviously, you know, as everybody diagnosed with this terrible, terrible thing, she is, you know, she's being brave, she's vowing to fight on, and she's very optimistic, and she's basically saying, you know, she's had a lovely life, she's had a wonderful family, and she fights on. And, you know, for anyone out there suffering and being down, that's all you can ever do, isn't it? And, you know, thoughts with everyone who's facing, you know, whatever cancer it is, it's always horrible. And, you know, treatments are improving all the time, and, you know, as Esther says herself, that, you know, she's very optimistic for her future. And I think it's an amazing attitude she has. But when you're talking about a woman who set up Childline and recently Silverline, so she does so much amazing good work. She is. And yeah, I mean, people who are called national treasures hate that phrase, I know. But I mean, she really is. And she's worked tirelessly for people. So, you know, we all wish her and everybody who's facing this as well, you know, all the best.
Absolutely.
And well.
She also doesn't get enough credit for the revolution in playgrounds that she introduced in the country. Because when I was growing up, if you fell off a monkey bar or something, you landed on concrete and you broke every bone. And it's thanks to her, there's this spongy, rubbery floor, and it's dramatically improved safety for children up and down the country. And as you say, all the amazing stuff she's done for Childline, for Silverline, we wish her all the best.
For helping, you know, the loneliness of elderly people, which was not a sexy subject, and she really put it forefront in people's minds, and a lot of elderly people were helped by that. And that
she's
was
changed a lot of things, which has been extraordinary. Yeah.
OK, Nicola Sturgeon's changed a lot of things in Scotland, and this from the Mail.
Yes, and Nicola Sturgeon's obviously getting in the neck over her transgender laws, and now there's been a U-turn whereby transgender prisoners who are violent now won't go into women's prisons, which seems to be perfectly sensible. I think when she introduced this law, obviously there were going to have to be tweaks in it along the way, that you couldn't get everything right in the first place. However, I also think there's a bit too much fuss about it. There are schools all over the country who are able to accommodate transgender pupils, and it's just a question of actually talking to people. So I know one school in our local area where there's a transgender pupil. She is absolutely accepted by her peers, but the girls in the sixth form didn't want her changing in their area, so they made a special area where they could do that. All done perfectly quietly, no headlines, nothing like that, and all got sorted out.
It's huge in schools, isn't it? I think most schools up and down the country are having to make accommodations and doing so, as you say, without too much trouble. But when it comes to prisons, what are you supposed to do? Create a gender-neutral prison for transgender?
You may in a sense, you may end up that way, or certainly a part of a prison where transgender prisoners would go. But I think that the existing prisoners have a right there. If you're in a women's prison, it's pretty understandable. You don't want a rapist being amongst you. So there are accommodations you'll have to make, but that was always going to be the case when this came in. It was going to be a work in progress rather than something you could do all in one go.
Dawn?
Don't get me started on this subject, I'm sorry. I
We disagree on this, me and Dawn.
Look, the Scottish bill where after 3 months you can literally say I am a different gender and be accepted, I find profoundly disturbing. I'm not suggesting, no one is suggesting, by the way, that transgender women are targeting other women, but predatory men will use this to prey on vulnerable women and girls. And a recent Freedom of Information request in Scotland that half of trans inmates, then there were 16 of them, began their transition after they were convicted, many of sex crimes. So you have to question how many of these transgender prisoners are genuine, and in which case we support them, and they need help to transgender safely. But predatory men will make use of this, and I think the 2 recent cases have been appalling. And I think the fact that anyone even thought that a sex offender, a rapist, had any right to be in a woman's prison is appalling.
I'll direct people to, if they haven't seen it already, Julie Bindel yesterday talking to Camilla Tominey on this channel, and it was a really interesting debate about this, and she put the case very strongly. So I recommend checking that out if you get a chance to.
The London School of Economics, their calendar has been overhauled. Each term has been renamed. Why?
Well, this is in the Telegraph, and this is, as you say, the London School of Economics, and they have cancelled the name Lent for their the winter term because it is too Christian. Now, the London School of Economics was founded by Christian benefactors, and along with many of our universities, they have stuck with the traditional names for terms like Michaelmas, Christmas, Len, Easter, etc., etc. And now they seem to be... look, I can't imagine there's a single student at the London School of Economics who have said, I find the term Lent really offensive for this term, let's call it spring,
but perhaps
autumn,
it's
winter.
meaningless to them. I mean, we had that census recently, didn't we, which showed the decline of Christians in this country. Maybe, I mean...
But a lot of this is traditional, and part of the attraction for international pupils is to buy into this whole idea of what is Britishness or tradition. What I do say is, if they tried to cancel any other religion except Christianity, there would be huge...
Absolutely, Eamonn, and the point I was absolutely going to make, can you imagine an Islamic country, for example, changing all the religious terminology they have? It's just never going to happen.
The first people to speak out against it would be people like the London School of Economics.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the whole thing is that if you're going to start changing calendars, we should look at things like our own calendar. Do we really want March named after Mars, the god of war, or Wednesday named after the pagan god Woden? You could actually start thinking about changing everything.
Don't give people ideas.
Oh, God, Nigel, where's he going?
That'll be the next one coming up, yeah.
Speaking of ideas, Sir Keir Starmer has ideas, doesn't he, about private schools? Many people would say he's trying to go after them, close lots of them. What is the Times' take on all of this?
Well, the Times' take is that Tory MPs are accusing the Labour leader of hypocrisy, because it turns out that when he was 16, he took a bursary at his grammar school. And the reason for that was the grammar school had been free. It then became fee-paying, but the local authority would put the fees up for anyone who wanted to go into the sixth form, which was what happened in Keir Starmer's case. I don't think he can be held responsible for something that happened to him when he was 16. And the whole point about ending charitable status for private schools is simply, is it right that the taxpayer should subsidise the choice of parents to send their children to a certain school? So the two things are completely divorced, and why I don't think it's hypocritical of him, because he went through this system, to want to change it for the better in the future.
But they're not just given this subsidy at the expense of taxpayers for nothing. They're given it because of their charitable status, because of the huge amount they do in terms of sharing resources with the state sector, with other children within communities. And that's why they're given that status.
Well, I think they should be doing that anyway, whether they have the status or not. That if you've got enough money to send your child to a private school. And I'm not against that, by the way. Everyone should be able to spend their money as they choose. But if you've got enough money to send your child there, if a school is actually very rich, it should help other schools around the area and other people who are disadvantaged.
OK, well, look, let us know your views at home on all of this. It's an ongoing row about private schools and their future. Always interested to hear your views on all that. Dawn Neeson and Nigel Nelson, always say thank you.
Oh, I wanted to mention the ghost.
Yes. Want to go to the ghost? Go on then, squeeze it
The
in.
thing about ghosts, what we'll do is we'll get you to comment on this. Dawn was going to refer to a story that 1 in 6 people lives with a ghost in their house. Are you one of them? Get in touch with us today and tell us that story. Guys, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Now, a PE trainer, personal trainer from Yorkshire, has become the first white British man to land a starring role, a lead role, in a Bollywood blockbuster.
Yeah, Richard Lovett from Huddersfield has taken over 50 lessons to learn Hindi and will fly to Mumbai, the home of Bollywood, to shoot a film with one of India's biggest production houses. And I'm pleased to say we can speak to him this morning. We won't be able to for long. You're going to be such a big star. We won't be able to talk to you anymore. But this is absolutely fascinating. You've been in lots of Bollywood films already, but in more minor roles. And suddenly here you are, leading man.
Yeah, guys, thanks for having me. I'm very, very excited. But this role has actually been coming since I got the role in 2019, believe it or not. So I've been waiting and waiting because of COVID.
Fantastic. So tell us a little bit about what the part will involve and why they want to have a white man in Bollywood.
Yeah, I think the director or the writer who originally wrote this film was a bit more out there, decided to write a role that's a bit different, you know, to see the boundaries he could push. He found me on YouTube. He just searched literally on YouTube, Gora speaking Hindi, which means white man speaking Hindi. And I was there on YouTube, and he got the casting agency to call me. They got me to come to Mumbai to do an audition, and here we are today.
Have you to sing?
I don't sing, but I will be dancing, Eamonn.
Yeah, and how is your dancing, Richard?
Well, I actually sent your team one of my dance videos. I danced live at an Indian wedding in 2014, and it went remarkably well, considering I've never danced before. So I'm actually looking forward to that aspect, not nervous.
So
must have got lost in the post. They're saying they can't find it. They can't have it. So we'll take your word for that.
Are you prepared for the level of fame that you're going to have? Because both Eamonn and I, over the years, have interviewed Bollywood stars and not actually, forgive us, known who they are. Done a bit of research, looked on Twitter, and they've had millions of followers. Yeah, not only are they hugely famous, hugely wealthy as well. I mean, is your life about to change?
I honestly don't know, but I've been there since 2014 training Bollywood actors. So I've been around them since then. I really don't think I'm going to be on that level straight away. But one thing I do know is after this film releases, I know I'm going to be on some kind of trajectory into the near future with possibly even larger roles, I hope.
So what do the Bollywood movies mean to people in India? They're just so much part of the culture.
They are. Well, it's a way of life. You've got to realise even the poorest people out there do have access to TV and films. They go to the cinema a lot. They celebrate film massively. I've been in film screens when the people at the end of the film stand up and clap and cheer and do. There's even videos of people releasing fireworks in the cinema screen. Believe it or not.
It makes us sort of question how conservative we are in terms of our reaction to films. I mean, I can remember once the whole cinema standing up and cheering, and it was for Rocky II. Back in the 80s when he beat Apollo Creed. And it was as if you were actually at the fight. But it's the only time I can ever remember people joining up and joining in, standing up and joining in.
Yeah, we're definitely a lot more conservative. It's huge out there. I definitely will have a lot more fame out there compared to here. I know that. Even if I blow up on the big stage there, I doubt I'd even be recognised other than to my Indian audience back here.
Really quickly, just imagine that we're your Mumbai casting directors and you're having to speak some Hindi to us. Show us what you did in your showcase.
All I can say is मुझे सब समझ आता है लेकिन मैं अभी हिंदी बोलना सीख रहा हूँ.
Does it for me. Does it for me.
Okay, guys.
Big thumbs up from us at Richard Lovett. We wish you all the best. And please, if you do become a super duper duper Bollywood star, don't forget about us. We'd love to talk to you again. Good luck.
I'd speak to you guys again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations. Well done. We'll take a break there. After that, we're going to hear from the Labour Party and Andrew Pearce, which is totally opposite to the Labour Party. We'll
Tory
get
boy.
his take on the sacking of Nadeem Zahawi.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. The new working week is getting off to a fairly fine start for many of us, and that is thanks to a ridge of high pressure that is building in across the UK, our fair weather friend helping to settle things down. We do just have this lingering cold front across the far south, so there is still a bit of cloud around for Devon and Cornwall first thing, but that clearing its way off, and behind that there is a good amount of sunny intervals for many of us throughout the day. The showers across the north tending to ease out as well, and the winds dying down also, though just remaining a bit brisk across Shetland up until the afternoon. Temperature-wise, not doing too badly for the time of year. Across England and Wales will be around 9, maybe 10 degrees Celsius in places, even 6 to 8 degrees across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Throughout this late afternoon and into the evening, though, we are going to see the cloud build in from the west, Northern Ireland into parts of western Scotland, and the wet and windy weather then returns with this next band of rain pushing in. Ahead of that, there will be some clear spells across parts of southeast England, so we could see temperatures drop off here during the evening, but they'll tend to moderate as we move throughout the night and the cloud builds again. But with the breeze building up again in northwestern areas, most of us will remain frost-free as we move into the start of Tuesday. This band of rain then moving steadily southwards, fizzling out as it does so, not much rain on that. Behind that we'll have blustery showers moving into Scotland. These will be heavy in places with some hail and snow falling down to around 300-400 metres over the mountains. Staying fairly brisk, particularly across the north, but where we see some sunny intervals in the south. Again, temperatures slightly up, 10-11 degrees, and a fairly pleasant day with those sunny intervals. Temperatures look to be on a slowly upwards climb throughout the rest of the week as well, but if you are in Scotland, do take care for the end of Tuesday and into the start of Wednesday, where we are expecting some particularly strong winds. Enjoy your Monday.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous. Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go. But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Mark White, as GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
The Prime Minister faces questions over his judgment following the sacking of Nadeem Zahawi.
Hello there, very good morning to you. It is 9 o'clock on this Monday morning. It's the 30th of January. Many days in January, I think, isn't it?
31.
31, so yeah. Wednesday's the 1st of February then. Today, this is Breakfast on GB News, on radio, on TV, online with Eamonn and Isabel.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. Pressure is mounting on the Prime Minister to answer questions about what he knew and when following the sacking of Nadeem Zahawi for multiple breaches of the ministerial code.
The government will announce plans to support struggling emergency care services today in the NHS. The £1 billion proposal will be used to fund thousands of new hospital beds and 800 new ambulances.
Boris Johnson has claimed Vladimir Putin threatened to kill him with a missile strike during a phone call in the run-up to the invasion of Ukraine. According to the former Prime Minister, Putin said it would only take a minute.
That ambulance story, we want your views on that one. I found out an amazing thing. There are a number of universities around the country, University of Ulster being one of them, that actually have ambulance units to train paramedics in and nurses and all sorts of things. So it's not an actual real ambulance. It is a room that is exactly like an ambulance, if you're with me. And that's how they train people, how to use gas and air and load patients on or not load patients on or whatever. But why suddenly has the government decided, we need 800 new ambulances? Maybe that's because there are 1,000 of them maybe clapped out, ready to be replaced. Yeah. But nothing is ever what it seems in the political
this
world.
£1 billion that they've announced was announced in the autumn statement, the funding. It's just being
announced
the
it
details
twice.
Today. Yeah. But our top story today, the Prime Minister facing questions about his own judgment. That's following the sacking of his party chairman, Nadeem Zahawi, over the weekend.
Well, Rishi Sunak made his decision within an hour of receiving a report that found that the Conservative chairman had breached the ministerial code multiple times in relation to his taxes. So apparently it was the same breach over and over again. He just didn't talk about being investigated.
Well, on this programme, we spoke to the Health Minister, Helen Whately, who told us the Prime Minister has done the right thing.
Prime Minister made the decision to remove Nadhim Zahawi from his position in government. He did that once he got the report in from the independent ethics advisor, which was very clear about what had or hadn't happened, and so the Prime Minister rightly made that decision.
He'd made the admission that he'd paid this penalty to HMRC. We knew that he had been Chancellor when he's being investigated by them. It didn't need an independent panel for the Prime Minister to take the action, did it?
Actually, it's a pretty serious thing for somebody to be removed from their job as a minister in the government, and something like that should follow a fair and proper process. That's why the Prime Minister asked his independent ethics advisor to look into it. Sir Laurie Magnus did that and then set out very clearly his judgment, which was then the basis on which the Prime Minister made the decision to remove Nadhim Zahawi.
That interview with his political commentator Andrew Pearce. We're going to get more on this Zahawi situation. So it broke nice and early yesterday morning.
I just turned my laptop on at home on Sunday, and there it was, crick straight away. And then my editor rang and said, "Can you do 1,400 words on the rise and fall of Nadhim Zahawi?" Utterly, and I tweeted immediately, "Nadhim Zahawi sacked, inevitable. Why did it take so long?" That was my initial response, and that's still the same view today, because we know that for weeks, if not months, he was denying that there was any problems over his taxes. He actually called the idea of a tax investigation a smear. It wasn't a smear, there was a tax investigation. And then finally, he concedes about a week ago when it's reported in The Guardian that he'd paid a fine, a penalty fine over his tax affairs, just as true starts.
But his resignation letter, he didn't say sorry.
He didn't say sorry. No. The only sorrow he had was the hurt it caused his family. He took no responsibility for anything he did. He conceded he'd done nothing wrong whatsoever. I've never seen, covering this story, stories like this for decades, such a graceless resignation letter. It was astonishing.
Perhaps this whole saga will have lowered a lot of people's views of him, because he was, well, not only just hugely personal and popular in Westminster, but the general public seemed to see his personal successes and his efficacy with the vaccine rollout, and he was relatively popular.
And he talked a good talk. He said, "I'm the ultimate British success story." He came here as an 11-year-old boy. His family fled Iraq to escape the terrors of Saddam Hussein. He couldn't speak a word of English. He's clearly bright. He's a trained chemical engineer. He set up an extraordinarily successful polling company called YouGov, which is at the centre of the tax investigation. And he's one of the wealthiest men at Westminster.
But he didn't resign. He got sacked.
He was sacked. And that was the point there, Isabel. The Prime Minister was not going to allow him to weasel out by resigning. He sacked him on the spot, wanted the world to know, I've kicked him out, because he probably knows he should have got rid of him a long time ago.
And I suppose the question is, can he recover from this? Will he want to recover from this? We've sent a reporter, actually, to his constituency, because the Lib Dems have been saying he's not fit to be an MP.
Well, they sack him.
They would like a by-election,
well,
let's be honest.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, we went to the constituency to speak to people there to see what they thought about it all. Let's take a listen.
Stratford-upon-Avon.
What did I say?
You didn't?
Oh, sorry, Stratford-upon-Avon. Here we go.
He broke the rules, he deserves to get the sack, doesn't he? Everybody has got to pay their taxes, he didn't do it right, so he deserves a sack. Simple as that, same as anybody else, really.
I think he should have resigned, really, and it's taken a long time. And again, I think, it's been this big delay in, is he going to go, isn't he going to go? And nobody actually makes any decision until the public, opinion becomes so strong that they think they've got to do something about it, really. So I wish they'd called a general election, actually, because I think, we've got another 2 years, haven't we, of this mess, really. And, I'd quite like to have a bit of a change.
I think he had it coming to him. He should have
I think he should have been
resigned.
honest.
He should have resigned at the beginning of the week.
And it's not the first time he's had question marks about his deed.
OK, let's get an update now from Westminster. Our political reporter Olivia Utley there for us this morning, dealing with the fallout 24 hours on, Olivia.
Yes, it's a very tricky day for Rishi Sunak, because there are questions swirling around Westminster now about his political judgment. As Andrew Pearce suggests there, it feels as though this resignation/sacking has been inevitable for quite a long time, but Rishi Sunak wasn't prepared to pull the plug. There are MPs who say that that's because he's too nice, that's one way of putting it, and there are those who say that he just doesn't have the political decisiveness. And the issue now for Rishi Sunak is that this raises all sorts of questions about his own tax affairs, and we know that once the sleaze caravan, as it were, starts moving, it's quite hard to put a stop to it. And the whole government knows that they will now be under the spotlight. We also know that Rishi Sunak is already leading a very divided party. There are plenty of MPs on the backbenches who are really fed up with his continual defence of his tax rises. So he doesn't have that many friends around him. And what Zahawi was quite useful for is that he was a key ally of Boris Johnson's. So now Rishi Sunak has lost one of those. The picture's looking pretty bleak for him today.
I'm interested, Labour are saying that Dominic Raab should be temporarily removed whilst these 24 complaints against him are investigated. It's been a very slow investigation into that. Interesting, the difference in speed. Why do you think it's taking so much longer to look into the Justice Secretary?
Well, absolutely. This is a really interesting question because on the front page of The Telegraph, interestingly, this morning, there is a big defence of Nadhim Zahawi from his own political allies who feel that he was unfairly treated. And we saw that resignation letter from Zahawi showed quite a lot of defiance. And what he says is that he actually did declare his tax arrangements to Tom Scholar, who was the permanent secretary at the time, and that wasn't included in Laurie Magnus's report. So the suggestion from Zahawi's team is that Laurie Magnus, presumably at the behest of the Prime Minister, rushed through this report for political expediency, essentially, because there are all these questions swirling about Zahawi. So Zahawi's answer to your question would be that it does take more than a couple of days to do a proper investigation. The investigation into Raab is being conducted at a reasonable pace, whereas Zahawi was, he would argue, thrown out to the wolves because Rishi Sunak wanted to look decisive. Rishi Sunak essentially has the worst of all worlds. He has failed to look decisive because there are plenty of people in Westminster who just feel he should have acted far sooner. But Zahawi and his allies feel that he was too decisive. He pulled the plug before looking into the matter properly. So that sort of explains the disparity between those two investigations.
Thanks, Olivia. Let's now go to the Shadow Secretary of State for International Trade. That's Nick Thomas-Symonds on all of this. Nick, the deed has been done. Any more to say on Zahawi?
Well, very good to join you this morning, Eamonn, first of all. But there are serious questions now for the Prime Minister, because we know from Sir Laurie Magnus's report that last July, Mr Zahawi made a declaration on his ministerial declarations that he was under investigation by HMRC. We also know that in September of last year, he came to a settlement with HMRC about unpaid taxes, in respect of which he paid a penalty. And yet, at the end of October, the Prime Minister appointed him to a very senior position in his cabinet. That speaks to very serious questions about Rishi Sunak's judgment, and indeed, by the way, not just appointing Nadhim Zahawi, but how the Prime Minister polices the ministerial code, because that penalty being paid in September was not actually declared by Nadhim Zahawi until this month in January. So we have a Prime Minister who has promised accountability, integrity, professionalism, but actually is just extraordinarily weak and has had to be dragged kicking and
screaming. Cut him any slack. I mean, he's only 100 days in the job.
Well, he may be only 100 days in the job, but he said on the steps of Downing Street how important ethics, integrity, probity and accountability were to him. This was a litmus test for the Prime Minister. 2 weeks ago, when we started having this debate and at Prime Minister's questions, the Prime Minister said all questions had been answered. It wasn't the case. And there's a very simple principle at stake here. It's that people who collect our taxes shouldn't be avoiding taxes themselves. The Prime Minister should already have acted.
So can you guarantee then to our listeners and viewers that there won't be any Labour MPs that are exposed for similar wrongdoings? Because Dan Needle, who did a lot of the investigation work into Nadhim Zahawi, said he's working on another case at the moment and he could confirm it is not a Conservative Member of Parliament. You're not all squeaky clean?
Look, I can't look into people's souls, obviously, or personal finances. What I can say is that Keir Starmer would take a very different approach in terms of these things. Keir Starmer expects the highest of standards, and I've no doubt Keir Starmer would act decisively in a way that Rishi Sunak simply has not over this. And even now, as we speak this morning, Rishi Sunak has still not come out and answered the questions fully and transparently about what he knew and why he appointed Nadhim Zahawi to his cabinet in October.
OK, I want to ask you about the strikes. Lots of families, grandparents, parents, children indeed, very worried about schools closing on Wednesday. Labour today, though, making a fresh attempt to block the anti-strike laws that the government is trying to bring in. It would keep the schools open, wouldn't it?
No, the anti-strike bill going through Parliament is going to make the situation worse. I mean, the government's own risk assessment, its own impact assessment on this bill raises that risk. It is a classic example of where the government's behaviour is just aggravating the situation. With the industrial disputes there have been, the government has either sat on the sidelines, pretended it's nothing to do with them, or they have made the situation worse. Instead of doing the hard grind, the difficult work of sitting down and finding compromise positions. This is a government that, quite frankly, is out of ideas and is ceasing to govern in the way that it should be.
Nick, you made me laugh there. You made me smile there when you talk about administration sitting on the sidelines pretending it's nothing to do with them. So, you know, when we turn that on Labour, has it anything to do with you? Do you support strikes or the right to strike or not?
We support the right to strike. We have been urging the government to find a compromise before coming into politics. Eamonn, I was a barrister. I represented many people in negotiations. I was also a mediator, so I was able to see disputes, if you like, from a more neutral perspective. And what I always found in those situations, and I was in many of them, is nobody came out of the room with everything that they wanted, but people did come out of the room with a position that both sides could live with. But to get there, it took hard work, it took graft, it took commitment to finding a compromise, which has been sadly lacking on the part of this government. And by the way, you're asking me about Labour and taking responsibility. In my role as Shadow Secretary of State for International Trade, tonight I am putting together here in Westminster over 100 diplomats and over 200 businesses, showing, convening together people who can build the networks to actually open up new trade markets around the world. That is action. That is what a Labour government would do in office. The actual government is simply out of ideas and out of time.
But I don't feel like you've answered the question on strikes on Wednesday in particular. I mean, do you personally think that schools should be striking? Do you think that schools should be closing their gates in the wake of the pandemic, where we know the impact on children and their outcomes?
I don't want to see the strikes going ahead. I don't want to see the disruption. That's what strikes always bring. Nor do the teachers themselves want to be out on strike. It's why we've been saying week after week, month after month to the government, take responsibility, try to prevent these situations from happening. And then the government's position has been, frankly, all over the place. They've been on the one hand saying it's nothing to do with them. They've been on the other then having the odd meeting, it seems. Then again, they've been bringing this highly unnecessary and, by the way, ineffective anti-strike bill to Parliament. It's time that they actually did the hard, painstaking work that is required to reach compromise in these different sectors that are out on strike.
OK, Nick, really appreciate your time. Nick Thomas-Symonds.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Is the Shadow Secretary of State for International Trade. Big gathering he has tonight. Andrew Pearce, I thought he talked a lot of sense.
I think he's one of the better, more effective members of the Shadow Cabinet, actually, but he didn't actually answer Isabel's question. Does the Labour Party think it's right for these teaching unions to close down schools on Wednesday?
Do you think it's right?
No, I don't. I think it's absolutely the wrong time to do it. I don't think teachers are as badly paid as nurses, and I think kids have gone through hell in the last 2 years, not able to get to school. They lost a year and a half of schooling. You can never get that back. And now they're going to close the schools again.
It's interesting. It's always so difficult with these interviews. They're so short that there's so much you want to ask them. But they talked about, the government not really coming to the table in an equal discussion. But Gillian Keegan's meeting with the unions again today.
Yeah.
She had a meeting a week ago. She gave schools £2.3 billion in the autumn statement, obviously through the Chancellor, so that they're actually going to have record investment for the future coming years.
I know.
It certainly seems as though education is doing better than a lot of the other public sector areas at the moment.
It is, because it's so important, and of course they know there's a lot of votes in it too. And I think Gillian Keegan is also quite an effective minister. She went to a comprehensive school, quite interesting, for a Tory Education Secretary. But I think this strike, I don't think the teachers are going to keep the public with them on this, because mums and dads are going to have hellish problems about who's going to look after the kids?
Well, they won't even tell you until the day.
I know.
So these kids are going to be turning up at the gate in uniform, sent
It's
packing.
reckless, and I really wish they wouldn't do it. And I think the government are digging in now, because I think people think that people get to strike fatigue. They'll just get sick of it, say, they're always on strike now.
All right.
Everybody frowning and scowling at this. All I can say is the kids will be joyous.
Yes, they'll be happy.
When have you ever had a school day?
They never went on strike when I was at school. Even during the winter discontent, my school stayed open.
Right, we're going to take a break. We're back more with Andrew commenting on the big news stories of the day. I hope you can join us right after this.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamonn Holmes, back on the TV
Surprised
with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Oh, Eamonn.
Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamonn Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
With us in the studio talking about the stories of the day, the consultant editor of the Daily Mail, Mr. Andrew Pearson. If we go to his paper today, we've got a headline, front page, which is about Putin's threat to kill Boris. So on the phone apparently said to Boris, I don't want to hurt you, but with a missile it would take only a minute.
It's sinister, isn't it? It just shows what a gangster Vladimir Putin is. No, the normal rules of engagement don't apply. So this was a conversation he had with Boris after he'd been to Kiev and was going to support Zelensky, and he was warning him, if you do that, I could take you out. He could. Look, we had the Novichok poisoning in Salisbury, killed a completely innocent woman, and it would have been a missile. I don't think the missile would have reached Britain, but it had been presumably the next time he went to Kyiv, he'd have got him.
But, you know, I would just love to have been Boris Johnson in that situation. We don't know what Boris Johnson said back, but you think, you know, I can't say on TV what I would have said, but I made it no uncertain terms. You weren't frightened of him or do what you want. My missiles are bigger than yours, do what you want.
It must have been the most extraordinary conversation. Just shows being Prime Minister is never dull, is it? and there's Boris yet again dominating the headlines. He's on at least 3 or 4 front pages again today.
The near-war situation.
Poor old Rishi Sunak, who's approaching his 100 days, barely gets a look in.
But it's interesting. I've got so many questions about why this has come out now. Obviously, he's talking to the BBC for his documentary to commemorate the first anniversary of the war, but he hasn't kept it back for his memoirs,
which
or he didn't tell us at the time.
No.
So I wonder why he's decided to release this little nugget now.
It's reminded people what a great player he was in the build-up to the Russian invasion, the first to send military aid, and he's just reminding people what a great telegenic character he is. I mean, he's got charisma.
He's learnt from Dominic Cummings to drip feed. He just keeps us in the
there'll be more.
Himself in the public
and there'll be more. And I suspect, and we're seeing him a lot more in the Commons now, getting up, making speeches about his constituencies.
Leading to what? Leading to what?
Well, you can talk. You can talk to half a dozen Tory MPs who'll say, if the local elections in May are terrible for the Tories, trust me, they're going to be terrible. There'll be another push to get Boris in to replace Rishi Sunak. Now, I don't think that's going to happen because I don't think the Tories can possibly change their leader again because you can't do it just like that, and others would step in. But it's all about building up momentum for Boris Johnson.
Doesn't stop the Tories eating themselves in the meantime. What about party chairman? Does he reckon he could be party chairman? I think that's a bit of a non-sequitur.
He'd be a great party chairman, but he'd completely upstage Rishi Sunak every time he opened his mouth. But they need a good party chairman because he or she is a pivotal figure in the run-up to the general election.
Who do you think it could be?
Well,
Penny Mordaunt.
Penny Mordaunt would be interesting, which is very ambitious. Ironically, Nadim Zahawi was the first Tory chairman who'd actually wanted the job in about 20 years.
Right?
He really wanted the job with a passion. He thought he could do a good job. You know, it's all about polling because of his polling company, YouGov, and he had all sorts of ideas, and the donors loved him.
Right, let's talk about the coronation on the 5th of May. How's Prince Charles playing this? What's come out over the weekend?
Well, it reported at the weekend that he definitely wants Prince Harry to be there and that he wants the Archbishop of Canterbury, who is completely underwhelming, in my view, Justin Welby, to be the intermediary between Harry and Clarence and the palace. William, we are told, does not want his brother there. Look, Harry and Meghan will use the coronation to further their own very woke agenda. It could distract, but equally I think he's got to be invited because he is the son of the king.
Justin Welby's got previous, though, hasn't he, with Harry and Meghan? Because it came out that they claimed that he'd married them before, and then he had to correct the record.
One of the many things she got wrong, Meghan.
Recollections may vary.
They had a little blessing together before the big event at St George's Chapel, and he likes them a lot. And I think if we're going to put people in camps, I think Welby's in the Harry and Meghan camp.
Ooh. Well, we like you a lot, and you're not. We'll have you back again next week.
And don't forget, I'm here on Friday.
Yeah, your
12
show.
o'clock.
Are you?
12 o'clock every Friday.
You've wheedled your way in here rightly, haven't you?
I did.
12 o'clock every Friday?
Every Friday.
Oh, congratulations. Well done. Thank you very much indeed. Andrew Pearce there, here, 12 o'clock every Friday.
And that is it from us this morning. We'll be back bright and early tomorrow. Do join us if you can. We're on from 6 till 9:30. But up next, we'll leave you in the capable hands of Tom Harwood. See you tomorrow.